Okay, Vicky, can you share your screen again? All right.
Here we go.
First off, thank you everybody for joining us for the September Ag Seasonal Workforce Services Committee meeting. Appreciate those of you who are here in the room with us, and those of you who are online. It's been a bit since our last meeting, but I think we have a good agenda for today, and we're going to get some good work done. I should say that this meeting is being recorded. Please be advised that your image and voice will be captured and recorded during the video conference, and your participation in this video conference equals consent to be recorded. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so for our agenda today, we've got a partial roll call, I believe, already done. That seemed to be what you were doing when I figured out sound. We will, if we have a quorum, we will approve our meeting minutes from the last meeting, and then we'll turn it over to Bertha and Petra and Susanna for their office update. After that, Alberto and Maria will give us the Workforce Services Division update, and then we'll be talking about federal rule changes. At that point, we're going to do a little swap, and Dan Zeitlin will be facilitating that portion of the meeting while I step away for a bit. When we come back from the break, we have more committee information, and we need some feedback from you on such items as the data collection and reporting from House Bill 2226 from however long ago it was, and also an update on temporary worker housing inspections. We have some discussion on potential changes to field checks, and then we'll have public comment, good of the order, and we'll be ready to go. And our next meeting will be November 20th.
This meeting is being recorded.
That I think was just us joining the meeting.
And Joy, we do need a roll call.
Sounds good. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's got an echo.
Okay. Are we? Can everybody in the room mute their screens if you're on this? Thank you. You are amazing. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's not going to work, is it? No. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone in the room has their speakers off?
Yeah, I'm not logged on. So.
Okay, how about is the echo now?
You're still echoing, Joy.
Is you all?
Okay, now you're muted, Joy, and we can't hear you at all.
Okay, now.
Let's try now.
I can hear the room.
Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Good.
And you don't have an echo.
And there's no echo. Yes. All right. We're getting there. Thank you all for managing with us through this crazy. You'd think it's a Monday. Anyway, let's go ahead and do the roll call.
Thanks, Joy. John Devaney.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, John. Mike Kempler.
Mike is here.
Kempler here.
Thanks, Mike. Delia Pena.
Good morning.
Hi, Delia. Elizabeth Strader.
Good morning.
Morning, Elizabeth. Edgar Franks. Okay, Michelle Besso.
Yes, good morning. I'm here.
Morning, Michelle. Rosalinda Guillen or Diana Lopez Batista?
I see that Vienna is on.
I do too. That's why I was kind of hesitating. Okay, Jeff Peralt or Brenda Rivera? Okay, Ignacio Marquez? Juan Gamez or Jerry Card?
Juan Gomez here. Thank you.
Morning, Juan.
Morning.
Uriel Iniguez.
Here.
Good morning, Uriel.
Morning.
Okay, Joy, back to you. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Could you please show the minutes from the prior meeting? Committee
Yeah.
members, you should have received the minutes from our prior meeting in your packet that was sent Tuesday. Were there any corrections that needed to be made?
No.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve.
I so move.
All right, Mike motions. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
I'll second.
And Delia seconds. Excellent. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. I think that was an aye from John. John, that was an aye, right?
Correct.
Could I ask
Okay.
a question?
Then we have our minutes approved.
Could I
Good to
just
go.
ask a question? This is Michelle. You know,
Yeah.
when I look at the minutes, of course, because we record, they're really, they're just headings. They're not really, you know, any minutes.
Mhm.
If we were making any decisions or something, would there be that noted here? In other words, what are the minutes other than an agenda? Is that what they are?
No, so we took no action at the
Okay.
last meeting, so that's why the minutes are pretty sparse. When I first came on in early 2022, the minutes were like a summary of the meeting, and because we also include the slides that were shared during with the minutes, we don't summarize, basically what everybody said in the minutes. It's actions only. So it's basically the minimum requirements that are required by Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, so if we took an action, it would be reflected.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. No, I just don't know what I'm approving. When I look at it, I'm thinking, yeah, I guess it's,
and we've already taken an action, in this meeting. We just,
okay, we approved the minutes. Okay.
If we approve the minutes, and it'll be on the
Okay.
minutes next time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Let's go ahead to the office update then. Bertha?
Yes, good morning. I'm Bertha Clayton. I am the director of the Agricultural and Seasonal Workforce Services Office. As per usual, this is a office update to update you on our operations. What's next for us as we wrap up our program year, and we start a new program year on 10/1/2025. And then after I update you, then you'll hear from Petra Meraz to talk about some foreign labor certification data, and then from Susana Rodriguez to learn about some compliance team data. Next slide, please. One of the things that we report on each meeting is the number of discontinuation of services that have been initiated by ESD. From the beginning of the last program year, this program year to 9/1, we've initiated a total of 2. One of these became a final discontinuation of services. And in the other case, the employer was able to sufficiently demonstrate that they met the terms and assurances of the job order. So we have a couple more in the pipeline. However, we are awaiting final determinations by enforcement agencies, which means that in most cases, the appeals process has to exhaust before there's a final determination. So we have a couple more in the pipeline, but as of now in this program year, we have initiated a total of 2. Any questions about discontinuation of services?
I just want to put a note for future discussion, perhaps, as to reviewing whether whether ESD has to wait for final agency action, or whether there might be, if they also review other potential bases for discontinuation of services.
Yes, there are multiple bases for discontinuation of services in the code. For example, the one that the employer was able to provide sufficient assurances, that one was brought on the basis of the SWA having information to indicate that they were not in compliance. However, the other one was a final finding. So when there's complaints or apparent violations that are referred to enforcement agencies, if we bring it under that basis, we do have to wait until it's a final determination. But I do understand your point, Michelle, that there are multiple bases, and that evaluation of which bases to bring it under is a conversation that we have internally at ESD in association with our Attorney General Counsel. Next slide, please. I'd like to give you an update on our interagency coordination efforts. This is a table that you are used to seeing this year, and there's been completion of 3 of 4 of these projects, and we've got one pending, and I'll explain that in a moment. The change since the last time you saw this chart is that our field check coordination interagency agreement with LNI, DOH, and the Washington State Department of Agriculture was executed in September, early September. You should have received a copy of the final document in your pre-meeting materials. And that was a interagency agreement that was required by the JLARC audit report from January of 2024. The finding by JLARC at that time was that the statute requires ESD to coordinate with agencies when performing field checks. And although we had been doing that, we didn't have a formal agreement in place. And so now that exists. Implementation is 30 days from date of signing, which puts us in the middle of October. And this interagency agreement took a bit to accomplish, and there's multiple parties. There's actually two divisions of LNI that are parties. So we're proud that it's finally done, and we will be training our staff on procedures. We do have a bit of a wrinkle when it comes to field checks that is on our radar, and you'll hear about that at the end of our agenda today from our state monitor advocate, Art Espinosa. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the interagency agreement, how that'll change our operations, et cetera.
What exactly is WSDA's role?
Well, as you'll see, so there, I think the final page of the agreement, it's really half a page, that are the term that this is the statement of work with WSDA, they only have compliance authority over pesticides. So unless there's a issue involving pesticides, there really isn't overt coordination like there is with LNI and DOH. You'll see that the coordination with Department of Agriculture is mostly notification only after the field check, advising, sending them a copy of the findings letter, basically tuning them in. But they're, of all the parties, that's really kind of the shortest statement of work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And thank you to Juan and Gerald from Department of Health, Caitlin Gates, for working, hanging on, and getting this done. I think it's a really good product. The other one that is paused, and I don't want to say paused, but rather this is an evolving area. And again, we'll talk about this later on in the agenda. So the last update to our temporary worker housing inspections, licensing, certification MOU with DOH and LNI was from 2019. And since then, we've had a lot of things change. And we also have a subset of housing. You'll hear about it, like I said, at the end of the meeting regarding mobile range housing inspections. These are the herders, the beekeepers, et cetera, where current Washington regulations don't address that type of housing as temporary worker housing. So it's pending potential agency rulemaking to address that type of housing. But for now, we have a plan as far as how that housing will be inspected and evaluated. And you'll hear that from me later in this meeting. So that is why the MOU is on hold, because it's an evolving area.
So it's just regulatory changes and not operational changes?
It's not regulatory changes, it'll be operational changes. Next slide, please.
Mike, do you still have a question there?
I thought she said some regulations had to be developed.
Yeah, so there's rulemaking that will need to happen. It'll be DOH rules, and Juan, I don't want to talk out of turn here, so would you like to address that specifically? Future rulemaking regarding TWH range housing?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bertha. So what, Bertha, you were saying is for right now is operational changes. We're not at this particular moment looking at this, Mike, as far as regulatory changes. If the temporary worker housing rule opens in the coming years, we will look at everything in the rule and more specifically this subset of housing. But right now, we don't have any plans for that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Bertha.
Thanks, Juan. Next slide, please. Let's see. So I just want to touch on this briefly because we have a whole segment dedicated to this later. But just to give a update on H2A litigation, specifically the Familia Unidas case. There was an order on July 19, 2025. There was a new wages published for prevailing piece rates. They're to the right there. And to remind everybody, ESD is not a party to this lawsuit. USDOL is, but USDOL directed ESD to post the new applicable prevailing piece rates on its website. That's been done. You can click the link to go to the web page where that's found. Just to remind everybody, Washington is unique because of this litigation, and Washington employers must offer and pay the prevailing piece rates on AWARE only job orders as of the date they're published. So this precludes the employer from paying hourly if there is a prevailing piece rate, and the prevailing piece rate, like I said, is in this table here. So that is still the environment until it changes, if it does. Next slide, please. I also wanted to give you a brief update on old business. You'll remember that in your 2022 and 2024 reports, the committee specifically recommended that ASWS have a web page that includes resources for both employers and for workers. That web page project has been part of the WIT portfolio, which is the new enterprise replacement system project that ESD is conducting now. We have copy approved, content approved, and I don't have a specific date for when that website will launch, but ASWS will have its own page within the new website, and we do plan to keep it updated and provide some resources. For now, it includes links to USDOL resources for the H-2A program, etc. So that is in progress. However, it's part of a much bigger project. Second thing that is in the pipeline is we are working with our communications department to finalize some employer guides and also worker trifolds that we, in English and in Spanish, that we will distribute to employers and to workers kind of ad hoc, and then also on site visits or field checks or upon request. We've written these as a team to highlight the issues and, kind of give guidance on issues that are most commonly misunderstood, like inbound transportation, what obligations are for outbound transportation, three-quarter guarantee, etc. So we're very close to publishing those, and that will also be posted on the web. Those will be posted on the website and shared with this committee once they're done. Yes, sir.
And the flyer that you said you're working, is it finished for the employer and the employees?
It's not finished.
Or trifold?
It's not finished. Originally, this was going to be only a trifold, but then we realized that we had just far too much content, and so we decided to split them and create more of a, I don't want to say comprehensive guide, but like a guide book, and then also a trifold. So kind of a very high level, and then, something more useful that has citations to the regulations, et cetera. So no, it's not a done deal, but it's close to being a done deal.
Because we have one that we're updating, the one that we're using for a long time. And so if you are going to create one, could we talk more so we're not duplicating? I mean, I don't know what you're going to put on there, but on ours, we have all the information from ESD, we have DOH in there. So let's talk.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share a draft too with this committee so you can see what it's going to look like. I know which LNI folder which LNI flyer you're talking about. This one is much more, I would say more of like a specific guide on H-2A in Washington. So it's not necessarily kind of like a list of resources or, a restatement of what the CFR says. It's more of like a frequently asked questions, guidance, et cetera. But I'm happy to share a draft so that the committee feels comfortable that we're on the right track. So if you've been listening to Northwest Public Broadcasting or reading the Yakima Herald, or on the Northwest Public broadcasting website, you'll see that there's a series regarding immigration, farm labor, etc., that is sponsored by Northwest Public Broadcasting in conjunction with the Yakima Herald. I believe the writer may be from the Yakima Herald. It's a series of stories. The first one, it came out on 9/7/2025. There's a link. You can click on the link in your slide, and it's a piece exploring the the impact of federal immigration policies on the local labor workforce, the H-2A program in general. There's I'm quoted, WAFLA was interviewed, workers are quoted. So please check it out. I think there's more coming. I haven't heard on the radio myself, but I have heard from others that it was on the radio in Clark County. So check it out. I gave an interview, I think maybe a month ago, and basically just education about our program. So please continue to watch that. It'll be published in the Yakima Herald. The next thing I want to update you all on is USDOL Wage and Hour Division Coordination. They've been a close partner with us over the years, and I just wanted to give you an update on the capacity, their enforcement capacity. They are, I think, down to 4 inspectors or 5 inspectors for their region, which includes Alaska, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And so their capacity is very low. However, we continue to meet with them on a biweekly basis. We continue to refer cases to them. They are going out in the field and following up on things. They just have a very, very limited capacity. So I just wanted to update you all on that. Go ahead, John.
John has his hand up.
Thanks, Bertha. In talking to Wage and Hour, they said they're down to that number of staff. Do they have a target number? I know in some cases agencies have dipped below their target employment because of agency-wide buyout offers, and then they have had hiring freezes, but they may intend to refill some positions. Do you know where they stand?
We don't know where they stand. I can't speak for them, but I don't know if they know where the division chief, if they know where they stand. So I don't have an answer to that question, but it seems pretty bare bones right now. Okay, I think that might be my last slide before I turn it over to Petra. And, oh, excuse me, I've got one more here. Let's see here. I'm only seeing it in part, so let me just make sure that I can. Okay, so just briefly, as I said at the top of this, we are winding up our program year 2025, looking forward to what we're going to focus on in 2026. You'll receive a data roundup for our November meeting for our program year data. We met as a compliance team last week in Tri-Cities for a 2-day retreat, and we are starting the new program year with improved data collection and reporting processes. In this program year, we've implemented a new case management system, and we've continued to refine how we categorize data, what data we capture, what reports we run, etc. So we are starting out from a much stronger place and also more aligned place across our staff. The other thing you'll hear about is potential changes to field checks, and that'll impact our compliance team. I will let Art roll that out, but that's something that we're watching. The other thing too that will be different is that we will be implementing our interagency agreement that we discussed earlier. What we're going to focus on this year is improving our intra-agency. So within ESD domestic recruitment processes, there is a position at Workforce Services Development that is out for recruitment that was part of our decision package, which will basically be the liaison between our program and the labor exchange piece at ESD. So I'm sure Alberto will talk more about that, but that's something we're going to focus on, getting better in how we communicate and getting better in how we are doing our recruitment interagency. We also are going to be focusing on interagency coordination and alignment for our temporary worker housing inspections and housing certification. I'm really excited about this. I think temporary worker housing it's been hard, I think, to manage expectations if you're an employer, because it's not been, I think, super clear what processes are. And I think now we're at a place where it's going to be very clear, and the agencies are clear, and we are clear in what we're communicating to employers. So that is new. Also focusing on employer education and technical assistance, helping employers navigate these federal rule changes. And we're also being proactive in connecting with employers about offering supervisor training in English and or Spanish. And we're also wanting to shore up our HB 226 data reporting and both the collection and processes. And we will get your feedback about that in a later agenda item. So with that, Petra, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Bertha. Good morning, everyone. As you may all already know, my name is Petra Meraz. I am the FLC Foreign Labor Coordinator Supervisor. And today I'll be sharing our FLC data. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And as you can see on the screen, as of August 31st, we have received, processed 468 total applications with 38,707 workers requested. 397 of those applications were certified with 34,186 workers requested. 2 of those applications were denied by DOL. Those applications had 9 workers requested. 1 contract was canceled for 100 workers requested on that the application, and 17 applications were removed due to the Barton court order back in 2024, and those applications had 1,346 workers requested. 13 applications we are still working on, so that's why they're still on the requested status, and those applications have 526 workers requested. The employers have withdrawn 38 applications with 2,540 workers requested for those 38 applications. Next slide, please. Thank you. And as of August 31st, we have 349 active contracts. That means that workers are working on these 349 contracts. Those contracts had 31,275 workers requested. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here we have the number of applications that we have received with the workers amount, and also the workers requested by the AHOs, order holding offices. As you can see, as always, Central Basin is leading with 119 applications. 15,546 workers were requested on those applications. And we also have Pierce County with 7 applications, and those applications were requested 198 workers. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here we can see the percentage of the active workers and contracts. As I said earlier, 349 contracts are active. Central Basin has 11,908 workers requested on that area, and that's a 38% of the entire workers requested and applications submitted. That's all I have. If there are any questions, if not, back to you, Bertha, or to oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is Juan. Just question regarding the number of active contracts. Have you seen a difference between last year's data and this year's?
No, I mean, we have a little more applications than last year.
Okay.
We're still the same or a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if no other questions, Susana, you're next.
Oh, okay. So hello, everybody. And I'm going to just speak on behalf of the compliance data. And I'm Susana Rodriguez. So, can everyone hear Susana?
Yes.
Okay. So you can go ahead in the next one, next slide. Okay, so then here, as you can see, we have the team has been continually engaging with the H2A workers and employers. So we have reached 401 site visits, and that that's a total of 21,938 workers that we have been able to contact. I have to say that the team has been very flexible when it comes to adapting to the employer's needs, whether they want us to be super early there doing a presentation or late afternoon or on a weekend. And if we move to the field checks, we have been able to do 15 field checks based on 31 job placement. I don't know if you noticed, but at the beginning it has been like very high number, and towards these months having low has lowered those numbers, having less job placement. Then the complaint status, we have been able to receive 76 complaints total. One of them is in process, and 45 out of those 76 have been informally resolved, and 18 of them has been referred to other agencies. And on the right side, in the lower, it says it's breaking down the complaints. What are we getting the most? As you can see, worker termination is still one of the highest after other. And then it's breaking down to wage-related, supervisor misconduct, worker recruitment, and the list goes on.
Are these all H2A employees that you're interacting with, just H2A employees, or they're non-H2A employees also?
The worker, for the most part, will be, and the verbs that you can add on, for the most part will be H2A. We do have a pool that we are receiving complaints from local workers. And I was gonna say, like in the other section, we have some potential treatment differential, and usually those are local workers asking for those. I'm receiving less hours, or recruitment, yes, or the H2A, I'm working in this area. So then we are receiving those complaints, and we are working this accordingly. Does anybody? Yes.
On the wage and hour, do you guys have an idea of any of those being referred to LNI, or all of them going to USDA? The ones you said they were referred.
Yeah, so the more I'm learning, because I'm 7 months. So which related, what we do first is we talk to the employers to see if there's any discrepancy, education piece. If that has not been resolved, then it will go to LNI. So we're sending those to our partners in the wage and hour. That's what we're doing for the most part. Or sometimes we're talking to DOL if there's anything that we can do. But at the end of the day is the worker decision. We'll explain, we can send this to the states, or you want us to send it to the Department of Labor. So we will do what the worker wants to do.
Yeah, and just to further
I've been in meetings over the past year in which there were some labor groups that made very strident assertions about recruitment violations and displacement of local workers. And they continue to do that. Are you in touch with them? Do they interact with your team? I mean, I only see 10 recruitment complaints there, I believe. How are those claims being processed and handled? Do they come to you? Do they know you exist?
Susanna, sure. So yes, we do have a fair number of worker recruitment related complaints, and it's an area that, you know, as I just mentioned, we're going to continue to focus on in 2026. You know, we do have a few third party complaints, but the vast majority of these complaints are either apparent violations where they're, you know, discovered during a site visit or a field check, or most often they are reported by the complainant. So as Susanna said, the complainant, you know, owns the complaint. And so if they're, you know, it's resolved, if they, you know, if they don't want to escalate it to an enforcement agency, then we don't have the authority to do that on their behalf. It's their complaint. And so as far as, you know, the quantity of third-party complaints that we get, it's very, very, very low.
And are there other resources available for the labor groups that are making these complaints for them to formally make the complaint to? Or is this AWS compliance unit the primary resource for investigating these complaints?
Well, at ESD, we're the primary resource for investigating these complaints. And, you know, we're trying our best to, you know, we do a site visit on every single job order. So, and we, you know, we have very frequent interagency communication and coordination with our partner agencies. So I can't imagine that, you know, that we wouldn't be quickly discovered as a source to report these complaints to or to talk to about these issues. But we certainly are, and we're willing to.
Can I just add, I mean, when you say, as one of those strident people, may I just say that this is Michelle, this is one of the issues that we just hear the most about out in the community. We are not making this up. This is something that we're hearing a lot about. There are not great ways to resolve them. I mean, I think that the compliance group are doing an excellent job at being out in the community, and people do find them, but they have no authority to require the companies to do anything. So they will send it to the US Department of Labor, which, as we have just heard, has very few investigators. And I've sent one to them, and, you know, you either never hear anything, or 6 months later, they may say, well, we're investigating. You know, there's not, and it's very difficult. There's not a quick way to resolve these. I mean, we have filed one lawsuit in Yakima County Superior Court on behalf of some workers, because those workers were willing to and wanted to pursue it legally. But that means you have to file a case in court, which is a extensive, long, and expensive process. So, I mean, it's not like it's easy, and it's not like there's a way to quickly for workers to get quick relief. Yeah, that's just my perspective as someone who talks to these workers.
No, Michelle, I really appreciate that, and your stridency is professional and welcome. So please don't take that as any kind of criticism. But once again, I see the industry in a position where we have a lot of groups making allegations, none of it is quantified. There's no hard data. This is the only hard data we have right now. And it doesn't seem to be any central repository of complaints, of data. It's like ASWS compliance team is doing its job and has these 10 complaints. And then there's this apparently large world of allegations out there that aren't recorded or aren't communicated. And so it's hard to understand the extent and nature of the issue. And so that's my frustration with this. Feel like we're, fighting phantoms here. And so I would welcome any changes that could gather the information from the different groups that are apparently talking to individuals, workers in the community who feel that they've been displaced by an H-2A contract, but to gather that information and get an understanding of the scope of this issue.
And what would you do with that information? So we suppose we were able to prove that it affects, if there were 50 complaints, if there were 100 complaints, what would we do differently?
Well, first of all, I and other people would have a better understanding of what was happening, which is a first step, I think, in addressing an issue and working it. But we aren't even there.
Well, I don't think the 10 complaints capture. If you ask, I bet the compliance people have many more people they've talked with who've raised the issue. This is just who has filed a complaint. Am I right, Susanna? Are there only 10 people that in the last year the compliance people have heard this issue from?
I can address how we capture the data. Correct. So the team responds a high volume of phone calls and inquiries that is not captured here. But however, when there's a parent violation or an official complaint, it goes in the system. That is correct, Michelle. And what was the following up question, Michelle?
No, I was just asking about the data, whether this was the total number of workers that the compliance folks have heard about who are talking about displacement.
Well, this is so yes, I mean, this is accurate data. I mean, one complaint could, lead to, an impact of, multiple workers, but these 10 are what are categorized in the code as a complaint or an apparent violation. And, our employment service regulations, don't deputize us or give us the authority to go and, kind of, I guess, dig things up. I mean, we're providing a service, and we have to meet our definitions. I will say that I agree that this is a big gap in employer education, employer compliance. The vast majority of time, the employer just needs some education, or they don't know how to comply. It's their supervisor may be representing something that isn't accurate. I'm not defending anybody here, but the scope of our service is limited. We don't have enforcement authority. You're right. I mean, if something's not resolved, then our next directive is then to send it to the applicable enforcement agency, which is USDOL. So, I mean, we get it that it's an issue. but there's, obviously there's an extent to the services that we provide.
But when you get so there's a well, and for example, I do know of one complaint that came into employment security, because those people then came to me months later when nothing was able to be, because DOL didn't respond, and there were at least 20 people affected in that instance. So when you see 10 complaints, that must be counted as one, and there were 20 people who went to ESD and said, we were all laid off and H-2A workers were kept on.
That would be one apparent violation. Yes. It wouldn't be like, we wouldn't count that as if 100 individuals were impacted or 20 individuals were impacted in our counting, in our data collection, that would be an apparent violation unless those 100 complainants wanted to file an official complaint.
All right. Well, I thank you for the discussion. I would like to see further refinement of this data gathering process so that we can get a better understanding of this issue, because it's certainly the hottest issue that we deal with. And there are a lot of groups that are speaking very negatively about the H-2A program publicly because of this issue. And I would like to get a better understanding. And I think the state needs to get a better understanding.
And to that point, I we're obviously an important stakeholder in that, but we're only one stakeholder. So I don't think that it's feasible to state that ESD could be the solution, I guess, to this wider discussion.
I do think it would be a good one for us to discuss more. I mean, one of the issues that I see come up a lot is a difference in, so one thing that has flipped. So let's say you as an orchardist need, a small number of workers from February until April, and then you need more for thinning, let's say, and then you don't need huge number of workers for a while, and then you need large number for harvest. Traditionally, right, the idea that I saw originally with H-2A is that you would bring in H-2A workers when there was a large need to cover that needed harvest, say. What we're seeing is once employers bring H-2A workers, they have them here from February till November a lot of times now, or March to November. Well, once they're here and they're in the housing, the tendency that we're seeing is to employ those H-2A workers and only hire local workers when there's a higher need, as opposed to hiring local workers and then hiring the H-2A workers to fill in where needed. And so people are saying we can't live on a few months of work. But those jobs, the tractor jobs that are longer lasting, those are now being filled at a large, a lot of them are H-2A workers. So it's not just like whether people can get hired, it's how much work is going to each group.
Michelle, Mike, I really appreciate the information that you're bringing here. I've been side chatting with Bertha, and we were wondering if you would be open to us having this as a discussion item at our next meeting in November, where we spend a good chunk of time. We've got some time to prepare data and other information on it.
Be fine by me.
Michelle, will that work?
Yeah, no, I think it's a major issue in the community. So yes, I would
I
support
agree.
that.
Okay. We will prepare that.
So yes, I'm done with this slide. So thank you for the presentation. Then this one this is the data collection data, the form. So the 21,911 workers have been requested, and then the 15,915 workers have been received. And in the bottom you can see the how it's breaking down. 62% is the matching the data, and 38% are not matching the data regarding workers requested. We moved to housing locations.
Susana, I know in past meetings, we have asked questions in regards to the total workers received, that was kind of a squishy data because we didn't have a process of how we can verify that.
Mhm.
Is that still the case?
Bertha, you can chime in, but as far as I know, we're supposed to only collect the data from employers. Our job is not really analyze it, not verifying, and but Bertha, you can add on.
Yes, this is one of the topics that we will be asking for committee feedback. I think that the way that we're collecting this is accurate. But I you said squishy data. I don't like how the reporting has gone. I think that there are obviously there's like a 6,000 difference in this number. And what I'll be asking the committee is, okay, well, we've had this raw data, now what? Like, the statute doesn't require ESD to, do any type of, follow up or anything like that. This is employer reported data as of the date of the field check or the site visit. So that's just, I think, a preview of what we'll be talking about later on. But this is the first program. This is the first year that we've done this data collection, and I think there's some gaps in how the statute is written that maybe could invite some rulemaking by the agency. But I want the committee to determine that.
Yeah. So then, as you can see, the same kind of trend you see with housing match is not matching 100% because of the current process. So 91% are matching with the housing locations, and 9% is not. And same with worksite location. 88% are matching with the location sites, and 13 there's a discrepancy. But yeah, we hear you, Riel. When I joined the team, it was a little bit, I was having following up questions. So I'm very excited that the team is seeing this, and we can have future conversations regarding this. And
So
with
just
that,
one question. So when you say worksite location match, so you mean the work sites that are on the clearance order versus the work sites where there actually are workers? Is that what that data
so the
shows?
worksite locations are the locations where the employers, the workers are supposed to actually doing the work. That's the worksite location. And that's the difference from the housing location, is that where the workers are staying at.
Well, and this is a point, keep in mind that this is a point in time count, right? So if we get out and do, if you have an ETA that has a, 20 workers certified, and then on the date of the site visit, the employer reports that 15 workers are, at these job sites that are identified. The other 5 may be, in transit. Their visas may have been delayed or denied. They may have absconded. They may have separated from the employer. So that is why these raw numbers, I think, are really not helpful unless you have that context. And so I'm really hesitant to keep presenting the numbers this way, because to a person who, doesn't know that these nuances exist, it looks like, whoa, like, there's this big gap here, that there's something wrong, and it's a point in time count. So that those are some of the issues that I'd like to unpack with the committee.
Thank you, Berta. I don't see follow-up questions. So with that, I am done reporting with the compliance thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, all of you. I will turn it over now to Alberto for the Workforce Services Division update.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Alberto Ciordia. I'm Assistant Director for our Workforce Services Division, and don't see her on screen, but I believe I should be joined by Maria Maravilla. Maria, there you go. Maria works also in our Workforce Services Division and provides operational support and guidance to our teams across the state. And today, what we will be doing is Maria will lead us off by talking a little bit about our performance as it relates to our Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Outreach Program. And then I will follow up with some key updates for the committee. So with that, Maria, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Alberto. Good morning, everyone. It is great to be joining you guys today. I've joined the meetings in the past, and today I'm excited to bring you some information. So to kick off with our first slide, we're going to offer some Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Outreach performance updates. And this is looking at the timeframe of October 1st, 2024 through August 31st, 2025. And this is in line with ASWS's program year. What we've noted in the past and past presentations and on the reports as well is that the total numbers that we're presenting here are based on the total FTEs or full-time employment, the MSFW staff that are assigned at the moment. So we have 9 dedicated FTEs, MSFW staff for our significant offices, and then we've had 2 FTEs that have been allocated to our non-ag significant offices. And there will be MSFW staffing changes that will be reflected in our future presentations as we move into PY 2025. So looking at 2024, the total outreach days that were completed were 1,455. And this is very similar to the numbers for 2023, where we were at 1,470. And for the total numbers of MSFWs who were contacted, for this year, we're at 24,644. Slight difference there, where last year we were at 25,564. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're moving on to looking at our complaints and apparent violations data. This is the data that's made available to us on our complaint log for our division. And so the total number of complaints that we've received has been 45. We've had 3 total apparent violations, and the total complaints that have been referred are 44. And 14 of those 44 were H2A related, so those were referred over to our ASWS compliance team. And then the total complaints that we had resolved at a local level were 4.
Mike has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Can you give a summary of the types of complaints that you handle? I know you said some are the H2A complaints. What are the other types of complaints?
Some of the other types of complaints are discrimination. One of the ones where we saw an increase in this last month of July, where there were missing wages. So I believe there were 8 complaints that were referred over from Chelan County to LNI. Our outreach staff and their supervisor worked very closely with the LNI office to ensure that those complaints were referred over for one group of MSFWs with one employer. So the missing wages tends to be the most common one that we see during peak season, and discrimination also tends to be one that comes up.
Thank you.
And Mike, one of the things we can explore is to see whether we can categorize our data similar to what ASWS does. And so we'll look into that.
And obviously the missing wage complaints are referred to LNI. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now we're moving on to look at our MSFW served by region. And this offers a snapshot. It gives you an idea of the number of MSFWs that are being served in the 5 different regions. And the trend that we can note here is that Central Basin continues to serve the majority of our MSFWs. In blue, you're looking at the last program year, and in orange, we are looking at our current program year. So Central Basin is at 2,222 MSFW served. So only a slight difference, very similar to last year at 2,529. And as we can see, the rest of the areas have maintained consistency. Next slide, please. Okay, now we are looking at our MSFWs.
I have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Earl.
Can you go back to this? Yeah, go back to the previous one. So on I see the numbers, for example, the Southwest. Is that a reflection? I mean, do you have MSFWs on the Southwest? Vancouver, Aberdeen, it covers the peninsula.
We do. The numbers are much smaller in comparison to Central, but they are served in those areas as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the data sets we use to guide us on that is on our esd.wa.gov website, our labor market folks have a dashboard. I believe we presented it to this committee in the past, and it shows the agricultural labor distribution across the state. So we do see it statewide, but as Maria pointed out, it's obviously a lot more intense in what we call the central region, right? Wenatchee, Okanagan, Yakima, Moses Lake. But yeah, we do see farm workers across the state, and the Department of Labor expects us to make our best effort to reach all farm workers throughout the state.
You don't consider, I mean, it's ag workers, farm workers. I mean, for example, the workers that work picking, what is that, flower arrangement? That they call it?
Horticulture or
Yeah, I mean, they work out in the mountains, on the forest, and that type of, because there's a large number of them.
brush.
Brush pickers, yeah. And also the workers that work on the canneries throughout the coast, down the coast. And so I know, for example, in Centralia, Aberdeen area, peninsula, down the coast, there's a lot of workers that do that. And so would those be considered?
There's a technical definition around what falls under agriculture and what does not. When we do outreach, I don't know that we go into that specific detail, right? And so our staff do the best their ability to identify outreach contacts. And so I can't for certainly say we do, but I know we make attempts to reach those populations. And if we did, we would count that as a contact. Whether that meets the technical definition of a farm worker, we wouldn't have enough information to ascertain that at that time. Where we would get more information to ascertain that is if we serve them and provide them a participant service in a workforce center. Because at that point, we would be doing a registration, we would be getting more information. Those counts, we would be able to tell you more accurately, yes, that is a farm worker, no, that is not. But for outreach purposes, there's not going to be precise data. Hope that helps. And Maria, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I stated there.
Nope, well said. That was clear. Okay, so now looking at our MSFW served by significant office, similar to the last slide, again, we can see a trend with Sunnyside being the leading office where the vast majority of our MSFWs are being served. And so if we look at the blue for our last program year in comparison to this year they've served 905 MSFWs, where last year, again, very close, they served 1,021. And if we look at the rest of the offices, they've maintained consistency with the exception of Central Basin. They had a slight increase from 418 to 436 MSFW served, but the rest of the offices have maintained consistency with a slight decrease in their MSFW served. Okay, and I think those were the slides for me, so I'll pass the baton over to Alberto.
Thank you, Maria. So I did want to bring two key updates. And the first update that I wanted to provide is around the agricultural clearance order waiver. We mentioned last meeting that we were going to be submitting again a waiver for consideration to the Department of Labor around 20 CFR 653.5, which essentially requires us to suppress employer information when we put job announcements on our website. We have made this attempt before, and our request was not approved. And so we made the determination that we wanted to make that attempt again. But one of the requirements before we place a waiver out, before we submit a waiver to the Department of Labor, is to request public comment. And we did so. We did get one comment back from an employer association, and it did push us to reflect a little bit on our request. And what, and I'm paraphrasing here, what the comment essentially is that it was understood why the department would want to disclose an employer's name and location, but could we withhold the employer's contact information? And by doing so, preserve the integrity of the agricultural clearance system and still preserve ESD's role, WorkSource's role in the process. And so when we evaluated this request, we deemed that to be reasonable. I went back and I listened to some of the discussion we had on this topic a couple of years ago. And there was concern about, okay, how do you preserve ESD WorkSource's role if you put all the employer's information out there? But at least by withholding the employer's direct contact information, we can still preserve our role in this process and still offer more transparency to our job seekers. So we did make that technical adjustment in our waiver request to the Department of Labor by saying we would like to disclose an employer's name, the area of employment, but we would still continue to withhold direct contact information. Of course, understanding a job seeker could find that elsewhere, right? But this would still preserve our role in this process. And so I did want to make sure all of you were aware of that adjustment, and that waiver request was submitted on August 18, 2025. Any questions or comments on that?
That's one where we have to wait for them to affirmatively say yes before we can make the change, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know, maybe in my old age, I'm getting impatient. I'd rather just ask forgiveness than permission. But this isn't ask permission.
I hear you.
All right.
Okay, well, if any questions arise after, please feel free to contact myself or Maria. We're happy to follow up on this topic. And then the other one, Berta mentioned earlier, through the recent legislative cycle, we did request an FTE to support our agricultural clearance order process. We are looking to further standardize that process, further collaborate with our ASWS team to strengthen that process. And so we have placed that position out for recruitment. It closes on the 23rd, I believe. And so I'm pretty excited about hopefully being able to fill that needed position soon. And we look forward to bringing updates on some of our work in the future.
What would that person do?
So our initial thought was that person was really, because we're required to enter these job orders on behalf of employers. So our thought was to have somebody centralized doing all that work. But what we're finding, you just saw 468 job orders. That's a lot of data entry. We are looking to be more efficient in that process. But that'll help us, one, standardize what we publicize out there. But two, there's a lot of steps in the process when it comes to recruitment, right? There's, as you can appreciate, if you're involved in H-2A, we have to provide reports to the Department of Labor like 30 days before the recruitment date. There's specific checkpoints that our staff need to be aware of. And when you're out in a WorkSource center and you're serving customers through a myriad of programs, it's tough to keep up with all of that. And so this position is really going to be in charge to ensure that we're providing key reminders, key updates to every single one of our local offices so that we're preserving to the maximum extent possible the integrity of this process.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I mean, with the federal budget situations, that impacted your MSFWs? Did you have to make some changes in the number of MSFWs or relocate or anything like that?
Well, I think Dan presented in his previous meeting pretty well. Dan, feel free to jump in, but obviously with Wagner Pizer, this falls under Wagner Pizer, the long-term trend we've seen is that funding source has remained the same for 25 plus years. And I've actually dug in and done that research directly, so I'm pretty confident about that. And so when you consider just the cost to operate, right, salaries, et cetera, just that funding source doesn't go as far now as it once did. And so we're constantly adjusting our staffing levels to meet our demands. And so with the MSFW program, we are required to do full-time year-round outreach in those offices that we call significant. One adjustment we made this past year is in 3 of our smaller offices. We requested flexibility from the Department of Labor, and what we said is we would like those offices to not be deemed MSFW significant. Of course, they are important, right? There is agriculture there, and we still expect to see outreach in those communities, but there's also important services that we need to provide virtually or in person through various programs that serve farm workers. And so that added flexibility help us. But yes, that's some of the impact. It has been reduced funding availability.
I would just add, I guess the state of play at the federal level is that the president's budget proposed to consolidate a number of workforce programs. I should note FLC is not one of them. The president's budget, I think, maintained or maybe even slightly increased funding from that. But the proposal is to consolidate a number of programs, including Wagner. It eliminates Wagner Pizer, consolidates them so that states have a block grant, essentially, decide how they want to fund different aspects of workforce. And again, migrant seasonal farm worker outreach staff are funded with 10% of those Wagner Pizer funds. So that's the president's budget. Both the House and the Senate maintain Wagner Pizer funding as it is. So who knows what's going to happen with government funding, long-term CR, or any final appropriations bill, but essentially the House and the Senate budget maintain the status quo maintained what Alberto just described. I will say, if you look closely at the budget, there's a program that's labeled migrant seasonal farm workers. That is the grant program that OIC gets funding for. That one is part of the consolidation in the president's budget, and that one is zeroed out in the House budget. But everything Alberto just spoke to is likely to hold true, the essentially flat funding for Pfizer.
As we stand right now, we partner a lot with the MSFWs, and so are there, for example, you mentioned some offices as of now to, I don't know what the future might be. Did you relocate? Are there any offices where we're not going to have a partner as the MSFW?
It's more pronounced in our agricultural areas, but I think if anything, because the department has created an expectation that we provide outreach statewide, that I think you probably have more partners on the MSFW front than us. Just for some of our areas that, we made that change. This used to be 100%. All they would do is do outreach. Now that would be, say, more like 50% of their job. They'd still be doing outreach, just not full time. You would still have that contact available.
But you don't have that. For example, is it Mount Vernon? Is it?
Yeah, we have a map of where these positions are located and their areas of coverage. And I think for like other areas, like if you're talking like King County, for example, that's where you might see, we do have somebody that does outreach, but you would see it as, probably 25% of their job. And yes, we would be able to provide you that contact as well.
Okay.
It's scaled based on what is the data telling us, right? And we're out there doing outreach to the best of our ability. Any other questions? Okay, Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Right. For the record, I'm Dan Zeitlin, Chief of Staff at Employment Security. Our chair, Joy Adams, had a conflict, so I'm going to sit in for her for the next hour or so. With that, I'll turn to our next agenda item, overview of federal rule changes with Bertha and Petra. Bertha.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for jumping in as the chair. Vicki, how are we doing on our agenda? I just want to make sure that we're going to be able to take our break at 11:15.
We are good, Bertha.
Okay, perfect. So Petra and I wanted to just do a high-level orientation of some of the federal rule changes over the last few months that have impacted our operations and have also changed or modified the way that we review ETA 790s. So this isn't meant to be a comprehensive review of changes because there are many. And it's not meant to be legal advice to any filer. It's just for kind of a high level for your information. Next slide, please. So these are screenshots of headings taken directly from the OFLC web page since July, just kind of illustrating the sequence of what I would call major changes impacting the H-2A program. As we talked about last meeting, the Department of Labor basically is proposing to rescind the 2024 H-2A worker protection rule and has put out a notice of proposed rulemaking to which ESD provided comments to, and I believe in coordination with LNI. Then we had a notification regarding the AWR for non-range occupations. In August, the Department of Labor took the position that it will again allow staggering of worker arrivals. I don't think staggering is the official term. However, it's the commonly used term, where basically you have workers on the total number of workers that are certified on the application arrive at different times. Next, on August 28th, this is probably the big one. OFLC basically took the vacation of the 2023 H-2A AWR final rule nationwide. And then finally, most recently, there's been an announcement about proposed revisions to the FSC program. So this is complicated. A lot of it's redos of how things were in the past. A lot of it is cancellation of how things have been done. So Petra and I just wanted to focus on a couple things and just kind of demonstrate to you how this is going to how this has impacted our operations at ASWS. Next slide, please. So the first one regarding the worker protection rule, and this one, we've already discussed this at the last meeting, so you probably already know about this, but basically there has been multiple lawsuits in different states around the country seeking to enjoin or cancel either parts or all of the worker protection rule that was published in 2024. In June of 2025, USDOL Wage and Hour Division announced that it wasn't going to enforce the 2024 worker protection rule. And then a couple weeks later, USDOL rescinded the final rule and issued a notice of proposed rulemaking. And at the end of August, ESD, together with LNI, provided its comments to that notice of proposed rulemaking. The period for public comment has ended, and so now we're in a holding pattern to see what the final rule is going to look like. So on our end, we're awaiting that final outcome from USDOL. We are doing staff training to confirm that our staff understand what, as of now, is technically good law and what is, what has been enjoined specific to Washington. We're also coaching employers through this, both on our FLC side and our compliance side. And we're shifting how we present features of the rule, for example, or components of the rule, things like progressive discipline, things like seatbelt uses, all of those things that were, bright line requirements in the 2024 rule. We are making clear that those are best practices. But right now we're in a bit of a limbo until we get the final rule from USDOL. Any questions about ESD's approach to this? Okay, it is confusing because, as I said, there's multiple suits in different states. So it's especially first before the rule was rescinded, it was difficult trying to parse out which employers were members of which class and if it was applicable to them. But now we haven't had to do that since it's been rescinded by USDOL.
Well, Bertha, let me just, oh gosh, I have a hard time myself keeping track, but isn't it a proposal to rescind the rule? Is it actually rescinded?
It is. So it is a proposal to rescind the rule. However, we are advising, so our agreement with USDOL right now is that we will still refer complaints regarding, for example, like progressive discipline. We will still refer those to USDOL because that is still good law. But we also have confirmation from USDOL that there will not likely be any action taken, or perhaps not even communication with the complainant by USDOL, but that they still, that our process, that it's still okay for us to follow through with our process and refer those to USDOL. And we're also telling complainants too, please manage your expectations because this is the environment. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this one, I bifurcated it in columns because it's a little bit confusing. It reverts back to the July vacation in the Louisiana court, and then OFLC applying this nationwide, and some non-clarity regarding which wage data is going to be applied in the future. It's a little messy, so bear with me here. So the current status is that the 2023 AWR rule is no longer in effect. And what that rule did was it required employers required the SWA and employers to separate out certain job duties and assign a SOC code from the OEWS library that was out of the big six SOC codes that are paid the AWR. So Petra, do you want to talk a little bit about this, like what employers had to do specifically, like with shuttle drivers or supervisors, and what that process was like prior to this, when this rule was in effect?
Yes, absolutely. So a good example would be if an employer submitted a farm worker application, and they had one sentence that said something along the lines as, a worker will drive workers to, the store, or some where the worker would be a chauffeur. We would have the employer submit another application for chauffeur drivers. That would make it, or if the employer wanted to, let's say they were hiring 5 farm workers, right? But they had the wording of chauffeur drivers, they would have to either resubmit a new application or pay everybody the $22.20. Now that is no longer to be done, right? Now everybody is getting paid 1982.
Yeah, and I can, every conference that we've been to over the last couple of years, this has been really the number one employer question. How do we craft our language in a way that makes it clear that, we're not in this shuttle driver SOC code, and we're in, this one, one of the big 6 SOC codes that will have to pay the AWR. And USDOL was not super consistent with its determination about certain language. So sometimes, the language would fall under the, the AWR or the Big 6 SOC code. Other times it would be, it would be determined that those are actually shuttle drivers or, supervisors. And the function of that would be the employer would have to pay the higher wage, the higher SOC code wage for all of the employees or all the workers on that job order, whether they were doing those shuttle driver duties or not. So as a mitigation strategy, employers began filing separate applications, one just for farm workers, and then the other, carving out maybe 6 to 10 to be, that to be paid that higher wage at shuttle driving. So this obviously, more applications were being filed, but that was a workaround that allowed employers to, kind of separate those activities. So in Louisiana, the district court vacated that rule, and then USDOL implemented it or adopted it nationwide. And the impact was that USDOL can no longer require employers to separate job duties and offer and pay the higher rate. So all farm work tasks described can be paid at that AWR or the, or the highest applicable rate, which in Washington may be a prevailing piece rate. So now the kind of practical function is that employers can include all of those job duties in one application and pay that higher applicable wage without having to carve out, some workers that will be the only workers that could be eligible for that higher paying wage. So now the description of duties is not so essential to determining the wage. And ESD, the impact for us is that we will no longer NOD, or we no longer can NOD for issue a notice of deficiency for applications that have that language, that descriptive language of jobs that formerly would have been under a different SOC code. This change does not apply to the contracts already certified. The employer still must pay the wages that the worker contracted for in that job order, but it does apply to all new applications filed. And what doesn't change, though, is the kind of golden H-2A rule that employers must still pay the highest of the AWR prevailing wage rate, prevailing piece, or minimum wage. In most cases, that's going to be the AWR. Petra, do you want to add anything?
No, not at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to point out that I agree that this is going to simplify things. It is also going to remove perhaps local worker ability to access some of these potentially higher paying jobs. But I agree that is what the effect of the rule is. I just want, as we've been discussing local worker replacement and displacement, I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Michelle. And our comments here are just not meant as an endorsement of the rule or the change, just as a just to describe the practical impact. Next screen, please.
I have a question. This is Delia.
Yes, ma'am.
In reference to rates. So is that saying, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So is that saying that as a grower, you have the ability to pay the higher of the rate, right? So you have to list the rates in the contract. I'm talking 2026, right? Not what everybody's at right now. Can you pay, let's say in the contract we list, $40 is the highest rate. And as you're doing a cleanup pick, you realize, they're not going to make it at minimum wage at that rate. Can we change that rate even though it's not listed in the contract? Or would we just defer to, minimum wage will get kicked in at the end of the week, or the hourly wage will get kicked in? I guess, do we have the ability to pay a higher rate if we choose to? I guess is my question. Even though it might not be listed in the contract.
I believe that answer is yes, but I'm going to hand it over to Petra.
Yes, the employer may pay higher rate as long as they don't go below the AWAR in this particular change. So yes, the answer would be yes.
And even though it's not listed in the contract as one of the ranges, we'd still be able to pay that.
Okay, so you wouldn't list in the ETA that you would be paying bonuses or what, whatever the highest would be?
So I guess that's my question. Do we have to list complete range of amounts? And let's say we're off. Let's say as a grower we're off and we don't put the right rate, and we want to pay more. Do we have that ability to do that?
So the short answer would be yes, you can pay more, right? So if you list that you're going to pay more, that is something we would accept. However, are you required to pay? That would be, we would need a little more information, and I actually would have to get back to you. Would you pay it to everybody? Would you have certain requests on why would you pay, let's say $40, the number you used? If you apply for 100 workers requested, right? How would you determine who are you going to pay those $40? Are you going to, be requesting certain experience, certain things? And if that is yes, then you would have to list everything in the ETA, right? But if you're not going to list it and you just wanted to pay someone more, then I would have to get back to you on that to see if you have to. But remember that everything that the ETA states, that's what you have to go by, right? So if you say you're going to pay $40 or whatever, then you have to put in the information in the ETA on who you're going to pay, why, and, certain experience or anything.
Good. Thank you.
I'll let Petra take this one about staggering. I will say that our compliance team did so much work in educating employers about, that you couldn't stagger your worker arrivals, and that you had to, calculate your date of need up front. And if, and the best way to deal with this would be to file separate applications. We spent a lot of time educating employers about that. And now we're back to, pre-2011. Petra, do you want to talk about staggering of workers?
So the OFLC has given guidance where we need to require the employer to put in a date, right? Like the start date of need. And it would also be beneficial if the employer would let us know, like let's say this employer is requesting 20 workers, right? So the start date of need is, January 1st or whatever. And we would appreciate if the employer would give us all the information on it. So if they plan to bring 10 workers by, January 30th, which is the end of that month, 2 weeks after, it would be very beneficial for us to know what's going on with that contract So if employers are going to stagger, if they could provide the information, how many workers and when there will be staggering, again, that would be beneficial for us to know what's going on in the contract.
Yeah, so this guidance, which is a FAQ, and there's a frequently asked questions, which isn't like a it's not like it's in the rule, but it was a document, stating how USDOL would respond to this and what their guidance was. So the action in August rescinded this informal guidance, and basically it states that if everything's the same, if it's the same crops, same duties, the same areas of employment, you can note on your application that you need to have more than that you want to time your arrivals at different times. That you're not required now that everybody start on the date of need. And that is, before this change, USDOL was closely watching this, and they asked the SWA to give them information about when workers were actually arriving to the farm, because for the next year, they would use that data to determine whether the employer was calculating an accurate date of need. Now they're offering, this change really makes flexibility for the grower to, bring employees at different times, maybe as their operation is revving up. So this is a significant change. And now also they'll only need to file one application so long as they detail what the different dates are and why. Any questions about this?
Well, I have questions about how it'll actually be implemented, I guess, in terms of, I'm still picturing the local worker applying for a job. How will we know when there are jobs available? So will it be listed on the clearance order, though, that we'll have like 10 jobs starting March 1 and 10 jobs starting April 1? As an example?
I don't think we know that yet. I know that they're updating the forms. I don't know if it'll be an updated, like if it'll be an additional box, or if it'll be, something that's different about the form, or whether the direction from USDOL to filers is going to be, please, tell us like, why these dates and what is happening in your operation that you need 10 this date, then 20, then 10 more. So as far as from a referral standpoint, it may involve additional work by our local offices in knowing where we are in the contract, and giving the employee that information to know that this is a term of this contract, and the need may be different depending on when that applicant is referred. So Michelle, I agree that implementation is not clear at this time. Okay, next slide, please. So this is 790, a snippet from 790A here on the top left. And then down here, and I know it's hard to see, so you may have to refer to your pre-meeting materials, but this is just for example's sake. It's taken from the period of May 2024. These are the different wage rates as of May 2024 for the different standard occupation codes. Like, for example, if you had a farm, like your farm worker, which I think is 2092, if I'm not mistaken, that's the AWR. But if you had language in your job description that could be construed as being like, for example, a fence erector and 47, 40, 31, then the highest applicable wage that you'd have to pay everybody on that contract would be 2803 under the old scheme. Now, because of the vacation of that rule, this in large part really goes away, and all these duties, if they are described now in the job order, would still be paid at the AWR. I put the kind of top half of the 790A up here, top left, to show this is the SWS assign the SOC codes. And so, Petra, can you walk us through that, how a SOC code is assigned and how that's going to be different now that the 2023 rule is vacated?
So yes, so the request is that if an employer is going to be needing, for example, just supervisors, that they would continue to just submit an application for that, meaning don't want to confuse the workers, or that's just a request that we are saying, right? So if someone is just needing 10 supervisors, but they just wanted to put it as a farm worker, they can. However, the SWA is required to review the application, and then we will determine the SOC code based on the language of the ETA 790, right? So if it just says, for example, they're requesting a farm worker, and it has a lot of the information is just for supervisors, then we would be choosing SOC code for supervisors, right? It just depends on the language of the application. You could still have different SOC codes, but we would determine on the majority of the language that is in the ETA for that SOC code. And the pay will still be the AWR though. So let's say you submit an application and it just talks about, again, just supervisor, and it has just a little bit of information of, chauffeurs or something else, and you put a different name on the title, we would review it and make the determination what SOC code that goes to.
Right, which as you can see, before the vacation of this rule, made how the employer described that duty so critical. And many times I think that it would really turn on one word or a phrase. And so now that is not an analysis anymore. So it from that perspective, arguably review is by the SWA is simplified. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is part A, the job offer information on an ETA 790 form. And we're showing it here just to demonstrate that we're not quite sure where the description about staggering of workers is going to go. OFLC is updating their forms. So there could be some changes to the form. It could be a notation in job duties. We're not quite sure. There's not a place for it to designate. There's just a begin, the start date, the end date. This is like, the term of the contract. So it'll be interesting to see if OFLC modifies their forms to clarify this change. Petra, do you want to say anything else about?
I do. I wanted to add real quick. So even though there's nowhere in the application as of yet to add the staggering, just keep in mind, I'm going to put an example. You requested 20 workers and you did not tell DOL that you will be staggering, right? And let's say, for example, you only bring 10 workers or whatever the amount is that you bring first, and then a couple weeks or something like that you're going to bring later. Remember that we take referrals, right? So let's say you only needed 10 workers for the first 2-3 weeks, or I'm just making dates up here. And we refer you 10 workers or whatever workers, and then you do not say anything in the ETA, then we will not be able to be like accommodate just for those 10 workers, for example, that you only needed at the beginning. So it is very important that you're transparent on your application as an employer to let us know what's going on, because if you don't tell us what's going on in your application, we don't know, right? So if you submitted the 10 workers requested, or 20, excuse me, we would think you need those 20 for the date at the beginning, right? So if you do not specify the things that's going on with your application, we will know, and we will not be able to change it when it's certified. So if you requested 20 and let's say we did have the 20 referrals, right? Then regardless of you not needing them, we would still refer them to you because that's what you told us in the application. So it's very important. And if DOL does assign a specific space, then that would be amazing, right? But if you don't have a space, just enter it wherever in the ETA, wherever is you can add an addition on the addendums. Another note, so I will read the application. We review cautiously every single application, so we will be able to see it. And if DOL ever requests, well, where's that information? We will point it out. So as long as it's in the ETA 790, we will see it.
And Petra, this change is effective immediately. So for all applications filed after 8/28, I believe this staggering is permitted. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. That is correct. So if we see an application, actually we are on the really slow time. As you all know, this program year ends in less than 2 weeks. But if any application is submitted, yes, we will not be NODing on different SAW codes. So if you have submitted an application and you haven't seen that we NOD on ya, that is the reason, because we will no longer NOD if you have different SAW codes in it. Of course, if we have any questions, we will still reach out, but no NOD. So if that's the thing that you're waiting for, you can always reach out to us.
And please call us with questions. We don't have a plan to, send a memo or a notice out to filers about these changes. We'll refer you to OFLC's website or recommend that you contact your filing agent or your attorney. But if you have any questions, specific to your application, then we're always available to help you through that. Any questions? Okay, I think that's the end of that. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, we are 15 minutes ahead of schedule, so I'll pass it to our chair, Dan.
All right, thank you, Bertha, and thank you to you and Petra for going through all of that with such clarity. We're a little ahead of schedule, but happy to give everyone 30 minutes if they want more time, or come back at 11:15. There's an opinion in the room, but longer break or shorter break? Shorter break, let's power through it. Okay, so it's 11 now. We'll still take the 15-minute break, so we'll be back at 11:15.
Vicki, can you amend our slide, please, to say on break until 11:15? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Have a good break, everybody.
We're turning the recording back on.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've already talked about these two issues, but now we need a little deeper dive by the committee regarding their feedback about the House Bill 2226 data collection and reporting, and also about temporary worker housing. And actually, I want to go in reverse. And Vicki, I'm sorry if I put this topic first, but I actually want to talk about temporary worker housing first. So if we could go to that first TWH slide. Okay, perfect. So temporary worker housing, just to set the table on this, so everybody's on the same page. So in the H-2A process, the employer files an ETA 790 in the FLAG system, which is the federal application platform, and then it's assigned to the SWA, the appropriate SWA, which is State Workforce Agency, and then it's reviewed in as far as terms and conditions, and then also there is a housing certification piece that the SWA is responsible for. So the SWA to USDOL is the final, is basically the decision maker about whether the temporary worker housing that the employer is listing on their job order as the housing sites where their workers will be housed is compliant. And compliant means compliant with the federal regulations and compliant with state and local law. And so the reason, presumably the reason that housing certification is left up to the states is because USDOL doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to inspect and to follow up and make that compliance determination. So it's us. ESD does not have any housing regulations in our code. So we're not a licensing agency for your housing. We're basically the communicator of whether your housing is in compliance or not. And in 50% of states, the states do their own housing inspections. They have housing inspectors as part of their foreign labor certification staff, and they manage that internally about whether the housing meets the standards that the SWA has to look at. In Washington and in the other half of the United States, there is a relationship with the state health department in inspecting, licensing those units, and communicating that licensing decision or that compliance status to the State Workforce Agency so that we can then, pass it, certify it and pass it through to USDOL. And it has, and there's a lot of reasons why that's a preferable model. First of all, we want the standard of housing to be good in Washington. We want people who are actually housing inspectors to be doing that work. They're set up to do that work. They have the capacity to do that work, etc. And so when we were audited in 2022, the OFLC told our office, ESD, hey, you need to have a contingency plan, because if L&I or DOH walks away from you, you're still responsible for certifying this housing to the Department of Labor. And so from 2022 to the present, we have shadowed L&I, we've shadowed DOH in basically getting some basic housing inspection training so that if we need to step in because some disaster happens, or just if we need to pick one up here and there, which we often do, we have those skills. The issue is that we don't license, and a certification of your housing compliance to USDOL does not mean that you are in compliance with, and you're totally okay and in compliance with state law or in state compliance. So those two things are different, and it's caused some, I think it's caused kind of some confusion over the years, especially when LNI was involved in inspecting the units, the temporary worker housing units being proposed that had 9 or under occupants. 9 or under is outside of DOH's licensing jurisdiction, which means that those units don't, in the DOH code, don't need a license. And so LNI was picking those inspections up as a courtesy to ESD and communicating, that compliance and that inspection compliance information to our staff, and our staff would then make a determination about compliance. Last year in 2024, LNI communicated to ESD that it did not have the capacity to continue to perform that service for us for the purpose of certifying H2A housing. So DOH assumed those inspections, but under certain conditions, that the employer, to be able to enter DOH's system, you had to go through the regular licensing process, and you basically had to opt in to get your DOH license, which includes certain components, which we'll talk about in a moment. So last year was a bit of a transition period, and the type of housing that's kind of left out is the range housing. And you'll see on this slide, the slide's basically meant to demonstrate that H2A housing can look many different ways. On the left, for these herder contracts, for example, sheep herders, goats, beekeepers, they an RV is usually the type of facility that is best suited for that work. However, this type of unit being used as temporary worker housing is not in our state code, which means that ESD only needs to look at the federal standards for determining whether this housing is in compliance. So we'll talk about that in a moment. The one in the middle is 9 and under. This looks like, smaller units, single family homes, units in which, usually for the smaller contracts where you have, where you're going to have 9 or fewer occupants. This is the segment of housing that is outside of DOH's licensing jurisdiction and will have to opt in to getting a DOH license if they want to use this housing as H2A TWH. And then on the right-hand side, this is kind of your housing that probably people are used to thinking about when they think about H2A housing. It's these units that have 10 plus occupants, and nothing will change about the process for inspection and licensing of those units. So before we get started, anybody have questions about the background or the environment?
None here in the room.
Okay, sounds good. And our colleagues from DOH too have reviewed these slides, and they will also be helping us walk through this today. Next slide. So the changes to H2A TWH for 2026, this is only going to be for the subset of housing that has 9 or less occupants, and everything, outside of that will remain the same. So we have approximately last year we had about less than 40 of these types of units. So it's a smaller proportion of the work of the housing that's used for H2A. So we're not talking about a huge number of units here, but a meaningful number. As I stated, as of 2024, LNI is not performing pre-occupancy inspections for our housing certification purposes, and DOH assumed these inspections for the purpose of ESD's housing certification. So if you're not going to use your 9 and under housing for H2A, then this does not apply to you. This is only for 9 and under units that's going to be listed on an H2A application. So ESD will require all H2A TWH to have a DOH TWH license to certify, meaning to approve your housing compliance to US DOL. I'm going to pause there. Juan and Jerry, do you want to talk about anything I've left out or what that entails?
Hi, Bertha, you're doing great. So the 9 and under facilities that opt in, as you mentioned, to be licensed by DOH would have to meet the standards. Since 2024, when LNI began, or I basically said we're no longer inspecting these facilities, we have a total of 51 temporary worker housing facilities that came from LNI that were 9 and under. And we've been working since then to sending out letters. And we've done most recently one earlier this month, reminding this subset of housing that they have between, since we sent the announcement last year, we've sent about 3 letters reminding them that they can apply to construction review services to make sure that they meet the standards for housing. And out of the 51 facilities, 33 of them we received that they have applied to CRS, which is about 65%. About 14 of them have not applied yet to CRS, which is about 27%. And there's about 3 that are pending, and then 1 pulled out. So we recently sent out a letter to remind them that they have until February 28th of 2026 to submit their application to CRS to get evaluated to see if they meet the standards for housing. And I can add some more after you go through the slide, but I wanted to make sure that we added that in there.
Sounds good. And to confirm, those 51 also include the mobile or the range housing. Is that right?
No.
Oh, they don't. Okay. So,
no. This is
my
just the 9 and under that are participating, as you were mentioning. These are the ones that are part of the H2A contracts, basically.
Got it. So I need to amend my number then. 9 and under, we have approximately 50. And then we have this smaller subset of housing that's mobile range. And H2A for mobile range is in a different chapter than H2A Ag, has different rules. But in Washington, there is no carve out for different rules for mobile or range housing that's being used for H2A. So the issue there is that our state code really doesn't envision or contemplate that mobile or range housing would be used as temporary worker housing. And as I said, for industries like sheep herders, beekeepers, those types of jobs, it's really the only adequate type of housing that will suffice for that type of work. And so then there's a situation where, mobile range housing will likely never be able to meet the requirements in the TWH code or the CRS requirements. And so we kind of came to this point of like, okay, so like, what do we do with them? We need to think of something that, can help these operators to be able to manage their expectations, know what to expect from an inspection, and be able to kind of quickly move through that. And so the proposed solution is that ESD, ASWS compliance staff will be doing all of those mobile range housing inspections. And from that, the operator will not get a license, and we're not requiring one, but they will get a, basically a yes or no from ESD about whether that meets compliance standards. Wage and Hour Division has agreed to do a training regarding the federal standards and how to inspect for them in a range unit. So all of our staff will be receiving that training. Last year, we used part of our FLC grant to buy inspection equipment like thermometers and laser tape measures. I guess it wouldn't be tape measures, laser measures. And so we are the agency best positioned to do those types of housing inspections and be able to do them in an efficient way. And so we wanted to make sure we were aligned with DOH, and DOH is bought into that model, and so that's how we intend to proceed in 2026. Any questions?
So, for the mobile and range housing, one of the things that acknowledging that yes, our code doesn't quite contemplate distinctions between other temporary worker housing versus mobile range housing. We do have a variance process in which employers can apply to get a variance for their range housing. So we still confirm that it is adequate and safe to provide housing to workers, but we can provide variances on various requirements that exist within the statute. Is that something that you and your team will be looking at as you're doing those reviews and including those variance processes into those?
Yes, and actually we've been having to address that quite a lot during this grace period of trying to get people educated and switched over to DOH. Many of these mobile ranges have applied for variances, and it's for variances for things like ceiling height. Temporary worker housing requires, I think, at least a 7-foot high ceiling. Many of these RVs, I think almost all of these RVs are not going to meet that. The other thing are things like water source, those types of issues that make an RV unique from like a stick built temporary worker housing. So a lot of range have started that process, but we will be using the USDOL range housing checklist to do our housing inspections, and we will be using that because that's what OFLC directs us to use. And there is a reference to state health standards when it comes to water source and sewer, and we will be seeking clarification from both USDOL and from DOH about what that means, whether that's a CRS issue, whether that's a local health jurisdiction issue. We don't know that yet. That's going to have to be what we're going to require from that. We will need to learn from USDOL, DOH, LNI.
I think part of it is if we get a complaint, we will be responding to it. And so just to make sure that our investigators are in the same place and not following or doing an investigation of something that has been okayed already.
Right. And LNI inspectors are, they've been inspecting these for the last, however long it's been since I've been here. They've been the entity that have been inspecting these. And they've also been the entity that the range housing operators have been working with to apply for variances.
Mike has a comment.
Well, I have a question actually on the 9 and under down at the DOH licensing processes. Says the application fee, then construction review services approval. and then the pre-occupancy inspections.
Sorry, Mike, I'm not understanding your question. Could you?
Forgive me if I'm slow, but
No, it's fine.
you know, until like last year, we didn't really have CRS involved in licensing. That it was just the TWH program inspectors would come out and they would inspect the housing, and you'd make the cut or not, and you'd get deficiencies that you'd have to improve or whatever. So is construction review services taking over the TWH inspection process? What's going on here?
I'll ask a question back. What makes you think that CRS is taking over the inspection process? I'm just trying to follow that because we have not mentioned that in this committee. So I'm just trying to figure out why. I'm trying to understand the background for that question.
You don't understand the question?
I do understand the question, Mike. I'm just trying to figure out where you're coming with it, because we have not made any announcements in this committee. We have not made any announcement Gov Delivery to our partners, to you, that is changing.
I can't understand you. It's kind of garbled. I'm sorry.
Is anyone else can hear me? Am I having audio issues?
I can hear you. Can you speak up just a little bit?
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, because Mike was mentioning, can you hear me? Is it better now?
You're good, Juan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to find out, because Mike was saying, is CRS taking over the pre-occupancy or the inspection process for DOH? And I'm trying to understand, I'm asking the question, what makes Mike think that is what is happening? Because we haven't made any announcements about this. I'm just trying to figure out where that comes from.
Because I've had housing inspected for decades and there was never CRS involved. CRS was always just when you built under the temporary worker housing codes. It was all the TWH program that did it. I mean, this could be kind of a side issue for you and I to discuss, but I'm really confused as to why CRS is in here in the licensing process, because they're not, as far as I know, they're not supposed to be. It's the TWH licensing inspectors that go out and do the inspection. So what I'm asking is CRS taking over the inspection process for housing?
So I agree with you. We can probably table it, but the short answer is no, that is not changing. We are not changing our procedures, how we conduct inspections. If a facility is a brand new facility or facility that, for example, the Mattawa Slope, for example, the facility that you and I and Jerry Care have talked about.
Right.
So, the certificate of occupancy is needed for a facility to be able to be approved through CRS to house workers. And CRS determines, based on requirements under WAC 246-359. Our temporary worker housing WAC is 246-358. And these two are, in recent years, since Jerry and I have been here, which is at least 4 years, we have been looking into the procedures within DOH, and CRS has always been part of the approval and confirmation of, and they also provide technical assistance if needed, but they've always been part of the processing of temporary worker housing license. So that has not changed. We had just made it more visible, including Bertha and her team. We've been connecting recently, bringing CRS to our meetings so that also the rest of our state agencies are aware. But the approval process has not changed. But we can certainly table that question and continue the conversation, but there's no changes to that.
Okay, so here you have, for example, like in the picture, the example, an older farmhouse that's been converted to housing for, say, 6 temporary workers.
Okay.
And it has to be licensed. There's no construction
if I can stop you for a second, it doesn't have to be licensed. 9 and under are not required
for
be licensed.
H2A though.
For H2A, yes. Yeah. If they
That's what I'm
opt in.
talking about.
If they opt
That's
in.
what I'm talking about. And so,
Yeah.
so this is housing that's been there forever. There's been no new construction to it. It's not new housing. So you're saying construction review services has to come in and look at that housing and approve it first before temporary worker housing licensing inspectors come in? I mean, that's what I'm inferring from this list here on this slide.
So yes, we schedule a visit. So we would, one of our inspectors would come out and provide. We also, when we do the review through construction review services, we provide the temporary worker housing self-inspect the facilities to look at and see what if they're able to meet some of the standards. But the approval process begins with submitting an application to CRS. And if it's established, you know, or like you said, a farmhouse that has been sitting there for a while, have they been licensed by DOH before? In this case, potentially no. And if they haven't, we can work with CRS and also do a technical visit to see if the facility can meet those standards. And Jerry, if you
okay, so what you're telling me is CRS is part of everything now. CRS is part of all licensing, CRS inspectors. We might as well not have the TWH inspectors. I feel like we're getting inspected twice. This is a conversation you and I have to have personally so that I can understand what's going on here. But it is an expansion of DOH
to be clear,
responsibility.
To be clear, we can table the conversation again, but it is not an expansion. It has always existed. So we can definitely talk about
I don't want to take up more time here, but we really need to talk this out so I can understand how this works, because it just seems like a duplication of inspections.
CRS doesn't send inspectors out. It's our inspectors that come out. So the plan review and evaluation is done by CRS because they have the building construction background. Our inspectors are not like, you know, they get trained and they have years of experience, but they're not the plan reviewers for a structure, basically. Jerry, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Just wanted to clarify, Mike, like Juan just said, CRS does not have the capacity to go out and do actual physical inspections. They do them virtually. However, they are part of the licensing process. They are the first step of the process for licensing. It is in the WAC and it is the RCW, and it's also in the WAC of 359. CRS's primary responsibility is to assure that construction standards, either new or existing buildings that are converted to a TWH from a resident, meet the minimum physical requirement standards for a TWH, which includes window sizes, square footage, the ratio of appliances based on the number of occupants that are in it. So there's a lot more to that process for CRS under 246359, but it is under their purpose and scope to ensure that those minimum health and safety requirements are being met. But they do not come
and
out
that's
and
exactly
go to the
what
facility.
TWH does. They look at window size, they look at ratios. None of this happened. None of this happened before last year. CRS was never involved in licensing ever until last year. Pardon me?
That is untrue.
With existing housing, all of a sudden, boom, it started happening.
New housing, they're still very much involved in.
Pardon me?
Brand new housing, they're involved in.
Only, well, that's something I need to figure out with them, because only if it was built under the temporary worker housing codes. So that's something that I need to reconcile with the DOH folks here. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I hope you guys understand this. This is CRS all of a sudden is here, you know, and it wasn't for decades. We were licensing housing and CRS was not involved. And all of a sudden it is. so I'm trying to figure out, did you just miss seeing the WAC role that's authorized in WAC, and all of a sudden decide to do it? That's probably what happened. But anyways, I want to bring it up to the committee because it just seems like an additional barrier, seems like duplication, and it's new. There was no public input. There was nothing. All of a sudden you're there. So I'm trying to figure it out.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you bringing it up. Gerald and Juan, can you take the action item to connect with Mike offline?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then Mike, I will connect back with you and see if we need to bring anything back to the committee around that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand, and some of this stuff is just surprising, and I want an efficient process for growers to go through, and I want it to make sense. I want it to make legal sense, and it doesn't make legal sense to me at this point. Or maybe what was not happening before should, maybe that was wrong. Maybe it should have been happening before. I don't know, but it's a substantial change. So I would like to meet with you guys and work this through. Thank you.
And just put it out there, Mike. I mean, if whatever happened before, both Juan and I came on board with TWH in 2021. So if you say decades ago, we can't really answer to those questions.
Yeah.
But all we're doing is we're moving forward what we know now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not an excuse. I mean, you know the history of the agency and the history of what was done, and so I'm just telling you what the licensing process was, and so I'm not trying to cast blame on this. So let's get together and figure this out.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Bertha, do you have more on this slide?
Not on this slide, but we can advance to the next one, please. So this is same photos that you saw before, and this is meant to just be kind of a visual to help people navigate, who's doing what the roles and responsibilities are. So let's start at the right-hand side over at the 10 plus occupants. This is your kind of bread and butter H2A housing. This is the majority of H2A housing where you have 10 plus occupants. DOH is going to license this. Nothing's changing. So the inspection, pre-occupancy inspection will be done by DOH, and you will get a DOH temporary worker housing license. That's required, and it's required by the RCW. And as long as you have that license, then your housing is, then that's what we need to be able to certify your housing. Moving to the middle now, the 9 and under, this is where we're going to have a change. This type of housing in kind of over the years, it's been inspected by L&I. I think DOH may have stepped in a time or two. To many operators and employers, it was kind of confusing about, which agency, what's going on. Now L&I is out of it. On the pre-occupancy side, of course, they have jurisdiction on the post-occupancy for health and safety. But on the pre-occupancy side, which is the environment we're talking about right now, your inspection is going to be a DOH inspection. Your license is going to be a DOH, temporary worker housing license. Not that it's required by the code, but it's required by ESD as evidence that your housing is compliant, and we can approve it once we get that license. And as I said, or as Juan and Jerry said, they've sent out letters, multiple letters reminding people what the next steps are. I think Juan quoted that 65% of operators in that category are in progress. So please get on that early. the other thing too is that operators who are the applicants for the license and who are and who the license will be issued to may not always be the same as the employer, the employer grower. So employers also need to be communicating with the operators that own or rent or lease the housing to them, because those employers communicate with us, right? Because they're filing their application, but the operators that need to get the license are communicating with the DOH. And so, and what we've seen over the years is that the operator and the employer sometimes aren't communicating with each other. And so the employer will call us and say, hey, like, you know, why is my housing not certified? And come to find out, the operator hasn't done the necessary steps to obtain the license. So ESD will also be sending out a letter reminding people or reminding employers to communicate with their operators if they're not one of the same, to confirm that their licensing is current and set to go. The other change will be for these mobile range folks. This inspection will be by ESD. So Department of Health will not be involved with these types of units. And they will be inspected according to the federal ETA/OSHA standards. Actually, no, excuse me. No, cancel that. They will be inspected according to the federal mobile range housing standards. And they will not require a license from any state agency. So ESD will be, we will be hopefully building an efficient and transparent way to get those done efficiently, because what we've seen is that this type of housing seems to pend for a long time, awaiting an inspector, et cetera. We want to get these folks through as soon as possible, provided they meet their requirements.
And Bertha, but L&I will be still responding to complaints about health and safety on those?
Yes, they have jurisdiction for inspection, issuing violations, levying fees. Caitlin or Udiel, do you want to expound more on L&I's role in temporary worker housing?
Yeah, so once workers are on site, then we have jurisdiction. So we will continue to respond to complaints, referrals, anything of that nature.
Okay. And they would have access though, or you would share information though about your inspection reports or information you have about the housing?
Yeah, we have a data sharing agreement. Okay. And also we've had joint site visits with L&I regarding housing issues to these range facilities. Like I said, there's not very many of them, but we already have established good communication pathways with L&I about these types of units.
Thank you. I would just say that it may be few, but I would say they have an outsized history of some problems because they are so mobile that it's hard to find them sometimes. And there have been issues where the one that's inspected is not the one where the workers are actually housed.
Right. And because of our partnership with L&I, we've caught that. And we have, at least I'm speaking about just in the past year or so, I'm thinking about a particular case. And we've worked with the employer to correct that.
Okay, thank you.
And to verify that the remedy has been done.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anybody else? So, I hear what Mike's saying about CRS. I hear all of this, and so I'm not trying to be sarcastic or anything in saying that we hope that this is going to be a better, more efficient, more transparent process for the inspection and the certification of temporary worker housing. LNI was a great partner, but because of the gaps in our state rules, because of it was really it was a little foggy about kind of what pertained to what, and so we've been working really hard in the last year to craft a scheme that is clear, that people know what to expect, that people can rely on the deadline, on the time frames, because we don't want these housing applications to sit in queue in our system for too long without moving to the next step. Okay, I think that might be it for temporary worker. Oh, I wanted to share this because this website is fantastic and it's new. Jerry, do you want to plug this website?
Yeah, I could pop it on in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So Jerry, do you want to talk about what's on here? I know that you just launched. Yeah, just
sure.
talk
Sorry
about
that. I misunderstood your question.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I didn't know this was part of the presentation. So, yeah, we've been working on this website for the last year and a half or so. We finally got it launched around March of this year, March or April this year, taking a lot of information from a lot of different of our partners and agencies, explaining the process of the TWH from basically from CRS through licensing through the inspection, providing some quick guidance and some contacts, a lot of great resources to tap into. We have a lot of our like I said, partner agency contacts or even associations that we work with. Many of you on this meeting, there are even links for that regarding as WAFLA or the Growers Association links as well, just to try and be helpful. The older website was more difficult to navigate. This is a lot easier to get access to, and we just added a lot of more information on here to answer a lot of questions that seem to come up. We have a huge FAQ section that we added into here as well, and to address what we mean by when we need a certificate of occupancy from CRS and those kind of items, to try and be more transparent about the process, to explain the process. And then, like I said, we have a great source of resources, some signs like hand washing signs that are both English and Spanish are available. So we just try to make it a catch-all for all information to make it easier for not just the operators, for the employers, for our partner agencies to go to and refer to if they have questions or are wondering about some of the processes. So yeah, it's been great. There is still some work to be done on some parts of it, but I would say 98% of it is done. There are some portals too, access to easy to do. If you have want to look up a status of your CRS project number, to find out where it is in the review process, or if you want to look up a portal through a TWH to figure out your historical information regarding past inspections, whether or not it's permitted or not, that's all available too. The one for CRS is currently down, but it's being upgraded right now because they have a new platform they're working on. So yeah, it's filled with a lot. It's basically a big giant toolbox with all kinds of good information. And also it's a way to, if you have a complaint, we do have a complaint online portal that we just kicked off later this spring, early summer. It's an online portal, and you can go on that link and then you could file a complaint, whether it be for a transit accommodation or for temporary worker housing. So yeah, it's hopefully you guys have the chance to explore it, and you might be able to learn a few things about the process and CRS and our other partners that we work with.
Thank you, Jerry. Sorry to catch you off guard, but I didn't
It's
want
okay.
Didn't want to end this without showcasing this website. It is really good.
I appreciate the opportunity to. I mean, we put our hearts and souls into it, and we're proud of it, and we've gotten a lot of kudos on it so far, and so I'm happy that we were able to get it launched when we did, and I think now is a good time to have it launched because there seem to be a lot of questions out there regarding TWH, and hopefully this website will take care of most of those.
Thank you, Jerry.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. So any kind of final thoughts on temporary worker housing before we switch gears to data collection? Okay, sounds good. Vicki, can you take us back a couple slides to the statute? Right there. Yeah, go advance, please. I think 2 slides. Okay, so switching gears now, we're going to talk about our ESD's data collection obligations in Part A. If you recall, this is a House bill in the 2024 session, and it has 2 components that ESD is responsible for. One is at the ASWS piece, which is collecting data from employers regarding the number of H-2A workers the employer has at each work site and the actual geographic location of where they're living during their employment with the employer. Part B of that is a hand harvester survey. That is an ESD function, but that is conducted by our data department. And so we are not going to be talking about Part B today. We're going to be talking about the part that ASWS is responsible for, which is the specific data collection. So not only do we have to collect it at each site visit and each field check, but we must compile it and compare the number of workers sought by an employer on the application, which is on the ETA 790, with the number of H-2A workers actually working for the employer at that point in time. And I should have added that this is a point in time count. The department must make this information available to the advisory committee on a quarterly basis. We started this data collection in June, the 1st of June of 24. I think the first quarterly reporting we had was maybe January. And then we've reported it twice, including today. Before I spoke a little bit about some of the issues that I think that exist with this reporting, including, the raw numbers as presented, not really telling the story of maybe what the legislative intent of this data collection is. So can we go back a slide? Vicki, I want to demonstrate, I want the committee to see again how we're presenting this. So for example, this is a quarterly report that we presented. It would have been at the April meeting, and you'll see that we're fulfilling our obligations by stating the total number of workers requested, total number of workers received, meaning that arrived on the farm, the proportion that match, that number matches, the housing locations match, if the work locations match. And so this is how the statute doesn't tell us other than what we need to present, how to present it, doesn't really tell ESD how whether or how to analyze it. So I wanted to take the time today to open it up to the committee to figure out, is this data giving you the information that was a legislative intent of this bill, and what would you like to see changed, if anything?
So Berta, you stated that the information is kind of a picture on that date. right, in terms of how many workers are on site. Is that an interpretation, or is that from you guys, or is it the bill? Because it would be better, for example, if at the end you gave a summary at the end of the year, say this is how many workers, just like you do on the applications were requested, this is how many arrived at the end of the year. I mean, something like that would be useful for us. So
to answer your question,
and also the other question is, and originally we were discussing this in terms of how do you collect the data, and right now I think, as you mentioned, that it's kind of hard because you guys have to make the effort to go out there and question for employers. And I can't remember if the bill required the employers to supply this data to you or not.
so that's a good question. So it's not a head count. So we're not going on a site visit. We're not going out to the housing locations, to confirm. It is a form that is sent to the employer at scheduling, and with instructions. Vicki, is it possible to bring up the form? This is our internal. I want to show them our internal data keeping, but can you bring up the data collection form? This is a form we worked with communications to create. We modified it a bit after we received some feedback early on, but overall it's been working pretty good. The statute reads that ESD is required to collect it, not that the employer is required to give it. But really we haven't had a lot of pushback. We did kind of early on, but once we've done some education and talked with employers, it's been pretty smooth, and we've had really good cooperation from employers. And Vicki's, I think, trying to bring up the form, and maybe Carlos, if you have it handy, if you could drop it in our chat so people can open it on their own machines. So, Brielle, what I heard you saying is that, yeah, it's in the chat, everyone. So if you would like to see the standard data collection form that we use, check it out. It also has instructions. Our communications department helped us obtain it, or excuse me, create it. But Brielle, what I heard you say is the statute requires a quarterly reporting. Is your suggestion also an end of year reporting?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other feedback for our team as we plan for the next program year?
This is Delia. Bertha, what would be the purpose for the end of the year? Is that more just to track like who all came in?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Trends and stuff like that.
Okay.
And also, to remind everybody too that, State Workforce Agency, our data points are the number of workers requested on the initial application when it's filed with OnFlag, and the number of workers certified by USDOL, which is the final ETA 7, or the job order, the final job order. The number of arrivals or the number of entries on those H-2A visas is a data point that is captured by the Department of State and is not communicated to the SWAS. So this would be like the state level mechanism of trying to capture that data at specific points in time.
Quick question.
Mike has a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What are some of the reasons why there's a lack of matching with work site locations.
Susanna, do you want to, or Susanna or Carlos, do you want to tackle that? I know we talked about it at our retreat.
This is Carlos, compliance specialist. There could be many variables, many reasons as to why the data in an employer says ETA 790 and on the form may not match. It could be, for instance, the employer failing to incorporate that address or location into their ETA 790. That's one scenario, but there could be others as well.
And that
okay,
has,
but you're not.
Go ahead.
You're not finding potential violations there, or if you are, do they get reported? How does that work?
Yeah,
well,
we are.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, Carlos, that was your case. So go ahead.
As we mentioned, ESD under that, we're not expected to analyze it. So we present the form to the employer, they fill it out, we bring it back, and we gather the data, and we are to report it over to the advisory committee. That's the extent of our involvement with data gathering.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I will say though that I believe on at least a couple occasions since we've started, we have identified work sites that the workers were working at that were not on the ETA 790. And that, I think in that particular case, the employer used a filing agent and thought that the filing agent had included it, but they didn't. And so that was, we wrote a letter documenting, so yes, potential, when sometimes, those things are unveiled and it's a education/compliance opportunity for us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so, it seems like, it's true that just the raw numbers, it's really hard to get the context, but it does seem like it's helpful. It would be helpful for us to have a sense of how much of an issue it is. For example, if people are being housed in housing that was not the housing on the ETA 790 and was not approved for H2A, that's a problem, right? Because then the housing wasn't inspected, and then also you're not going to find the workers at that housing. So I think if we knew a little bit more as to, what you're saying is with a point in time, maybe they only have half their workers, so they're just not using. Would a mismatch include that they're just not using one of the houses that they put down 3 houses and they're only using 2? Which would seem different to me than the situation in which, they put down 2 houses and actually they're using a third to house their workers. So, I guess that explanation would make it more useful for the committee to figure out, is this something we need to pay attention to?
So like in aggregate data without, going through case by case, what would be the best way for the committee to intake that?
Well, when you say mismatch, was it housing that was not on the ETA 790?
Well, that is a potential discrepancy, as is, our case where we had workers working on a work site that wasn't certified on the ETA 790. And granted, a lot of those, we've had those issues since the beginning, and usually they're discovered at the site visit or the field check. But this is another mechanism also to do that examination. But as I understand though, the purpose of this bill was to get data that at any point in time the committee could use to identify the location of the workers. is that, is our data reporting doing that for you?
So, as a great friend from Yakima is saying, I think it triggers some more thoughts in our mind in terms of, since you're already gathering the data, for us also it would be useful in terms of if this organization, for example, you went over there, you get this information back in a number of workers, is this a licensed contractor, for example? Which I know we've had discussions on that, and you guys have helped us a lot to tighten that up a little bit. But that would be helpful, because let's say you get information from some entity, and then they're nowhere on our database in regards to being a licensed contractor. And I don't know if that would be useful for this or not. I'm just kind of throwing that out that for us, it would help.
Are you specifically like the sharing of this data with?
Yeah.
Well, I think so. At this point, we report it only in a, to the committee as the statute requires us. But that would be a conversation, I think, for the committee to have about whether that's, something that we should think about.
But in terms of you,
I know there
what
was
you
some
do with the data when it comes to you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're already matching some of it in terms of if you doesn't match the worker's request, it doesn't match the application, things like that. I mean, I think, my point is we're collecting the data, we're collecting the information. What is it that we're doing with the information other than just, okay, here are the numbers?
We're doing that, which is what the statute requires us to do. Really the only thing the statute requires us to do with this data at this point. Vicki, if you could please go back to my slide where we do a screenshot of our internal data entry on HB 2226. So this is what we input into our system. So, it's self-explanatory, but in the notes, number 6, that is the field where our staff inputs, if there's a discrepancy, why there's a discrepancy. Sometimes it's just an answer, or it's a question to the employer, like, says you got 25 certified for 25. Where are the other 6? And usually that would be a note. In this screenshot, it's not, it's just an example, but in this, it's not. But we do have a place to capture those notes, but we're not required by the statute to include those notes or those reasons in our reporting.
Well, as I recall, one reason that I remember, at least, that Rosalinda has always said that it would be good to know where people are is if, in the case of an additional, of a pandemic again, where we didn't know necessarily where people, how many workers are there and where are they, right? But I mean, I wasn't at the legislature, so I have no idea what the legislature intended by this. I guess we'd have to ask the legislature what they intended. But I mean, to me, if there were, a pandemic but we would need to know the actual location, not just the question of when is there a mismatch, in the sense of if there's a big fire, it would be like there are many of them. It would be helpful for the fire department or the health department or somebody to know, there are 100 workers living at that location. And, that they need to be evacuated. And I think one sense was we really didn't have any data like that, right? But giving a mismatch doesn't give us that at all.
Right. And we could, we could bring up the form because, I mean, we don't obviously write this information is captured from the form. We scan the form, we put the form in, we attach it in our system. So we can pull up the form and it will have the address and the number, and the date that it was captured. So we do have that also, but this is the data entry that we do in our system to run our reports.
I think, Bertha, this is Dan. It's one thing for the committee to talk about and think about how they want to view or understand the data. I think if the committee desires something actionable with it, like what Michelle's talking about, we should capture that, but then that would likely require either rulemaking or maybe even a statutory amendment to make sure that's the legislative intent to say that it may be used for those purposes. So Michelle, just to use your example, if the advisory committee decided that's a good idea in the case of an emergency, we want to use this information so that whatever entity can go see that farm workers are okay or whatever the case might be, I suspect that we would at least need rulemaking, maybe even a statutory change, because we're talking about the government doing something specific with data that employers provided. And the statute is just speaking to ESC shall collect this information.
Why can't you just use the 790? I mean, if there's an emergency and if there's supposedly 100 workers somewhere, and they list the housing where they're going to be for this employer, and you need to contact them.
But they're not there at that housing, Mike. That's what we're finding out. 15% of the time, they're not at that housing or whatever it was. So, I mean.
And just using that example, I think my point is that if the committee would like there to be something that employment security would do with this data, whatever that might be, something actionable with it other than just collecting it, my guess would be at least rulemaking, maybe a statutory amendment would be needed.
Well, and also I will say, we've met as a compliance team last week, and we also identified, that some of us we're not entering this the same. So, we have some, we had some discrepancies, which, would be expected, the first year of doing this. So now our team, we're aligned on, everybody's entering things the same way. So so we're just going through this, and we want, we want to hear feedback from the committee, and please email me, Vicki, if you think of anything, that would be helpful or that you want to add to the conversation. We're listening. And I think I might wrap it here because Art, I believe, is next. So thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Well, Bertha, I just want to make that one last point that I guess, I mean, it's very literal. I don't know. I mean, I guess the fact that we get a number, you don't think the statute would authorize you to provide a little more information as to what the mismatch means, that there are workers in housing that is not on the 790, or that it's just that there are workers, in other words, the data, the number, is it just the raw numbers that you think you can provide?
So this is Joy. I'm going to jump in on that one. We have a fair amount of tension between what data we're allowed to share, what data we're not allowed to share. And I'm sitting here as we're talking, skimming through the legislative documents on this original bill to try and find some hint of legislative intent, and I'm not finding it yet. One of the things about rulemaking is puts our intent out there and it says, this is what we plan to do. And it puts it out there in a public forum before we start subjecting employers to providing this information, especially if it's going to be used for any sort of gently adverse, whatever outcome, not outcome, but you know what I'm saying. If we're going to use it in any way, we have to be clear about why we're collecting it in that way. So could we take a permissive view of the law as it stands right now? Maybe. Would it be a better process for us to think about it and make sure that we don't need to do some rulemaking, or, you know, a simple rulemaking task is not that difficult, would be in place before the next season if needed. So we'll take that back and give it a close look and see where we're at. And we can probably bring some good information back to this committee at the next meeting as far as what we have learned.
I mean, my question is, we're collecting data for what purpose? Why? I mean, we're not gonna do anything with it. What we're trying to solve.
That's what I'm skimming back into the legislative intent part to see why, you know, what the original basis for this was. So that's going to take us a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would simply come down to both of your points. What would the advisory committee like to see be done with this data or shared about this data? And then we would just have to go back and see, can we just do that? Do we need a rule? Do we need a statute change?
Right.
Well, I mean, I may be looking at this with you know, in a very general or rudimentary way, but when I see a mismatch of workers and work sites, immediately I'm thinking, well, an agency is going to be triggering an investigation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a problem. And same thing with housing. If people are putting workers into housing that's uninspected, unlicensed, that's a problem. And so does this data suggest that? I don't know. I don't know what the limitations of the collection process are, but you know, that's how I'm looking at it, is that whether it's indicative of a compliance problem, which in some cases could be pretty serious.
Agreed. So we're gonna take it back and we're gonna give it some thought and come back to y'all at the November meeting with some information. All right, last thing on our substantive part of our agenda, Arturo is going to update us on some potential changes to the field checks. Arturo?
All right. Can y'all hear me? Hopefully so.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Again, my name's Arturo Espinoza. I'm the Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Monitor, and I'd like to discuss with the members a little bit about possible field check changes that could be headed our way potentially. All right, so so just to get, well, did I miss this slide? That's okay. So just to get back to basics, this isn't the slide I'm going to talk about, but just to get back to basics, I want to make sure that everyone understands what a field check is. If you're a nerd like me, I would go directly to the CFR and just read off of that. But the CFR for that is 653.503 to be exact. But to sum it up, a field check is but according to the U.S. Department of Labor, it basically defines as an unannounced on-site inspection conducted to verify that employers are complying with the terms of the job order. So field checks are triggered or authorized to be conducted when workers work their way through the work source center and are confirmed to be placed on an open job order. Now, I do want to briefly mention the distinction between that there is a difference between a site visit and a field check. Since I'll be mentioning both of them in this brief, I don't want people confused. What makes the site visit different to the field check is that the requirement of a worker be placed is not there. Visits are scheduled in advance ahead of time at the convenience of the employer, where the primary goal there is to provide contractual information dissemination to the workers. That's not to say employers, supervisors, and human resource folks don't participate in those visits. They absolutely do, but the goal again is primarily to provide information, not conduct an inspection at that point in time. And they do plan these ahead of time. We certainly don't show up to site visits unannounced. Okay, so now we're on the right slide. So with these changes, why are you hearing from me and not Bertha? Well, to put it simply, the state monitor advocate's duties do dip into the H2A space. It was mentioned or asked of me at the last meeting whether or not H2A was considered to be MSFW, and I can confirm today that they are in fact considered MSFWs. And so I'm charged with monitoring them H2A under MSFW for compliance. So I'll mention one last duty of mine that's relevant to this presentation. It's basically that I have to attend mandatory USDOL trainings. It's actually at one of these trainings that these proposed changes were brought up, or there was new information anyway. But at these USDOL provided trainings, they provide updates, rule changes, regulations, et cetera. It's then my job to take that information, pass it on to the appropriate parties here in the state, and then monitor for the changes to make sure that the state stays in compliance. Now, I mention again the trainings because it was during one of those such sessions, specifically around proper field check reporting, that the National Monitor Advocate casually mentioned that to conduct a field check, the placement had to be placed and then still be working at the time that the check could be conducted or would be conducted. Now that piqued my interest, and obviously the interest of many SMAs. This was a nationwide training because the training chat lit up. It has always been my understanding while working in ASWS conducting these checks that the simple act of a worker moving through the workforce system and being placed on the job order was all that was needed in order to authorize or trigger a field check. Obviously, other SMAs or state monitor advocates that attending this training understood the same thing, and having that been the rule, I guess, for them as well as us in the past, because they were inundating the chat with requests for more information and clarification. I was part of that mob, I guess. But it got so bad that the National Monitor Advocate and the Regional Monitor Advocate asked that if any of us had any more questions or needed any more information or guidance, that they'd be happy to provide that assistance or clarification. But all we had to do was send them an email after the training because it was becoming derailed. So I did do that. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. So again, to clarify, what I was asking for is clarification specifically on the change. That change being that it was suggested that the domestic worker must still be working on the job order to conduct the field check. And they did end up replying. They replied by citing the CFR 653.503, and then just restating what they had mentioned during the training. I followed up with a request for additional information, and it was basically the response was just a copy paste of the exact same thing with that CFR, and then field checks are not to be conducted unless the placement is still there and actively working the job order. So they also suggested in there that they, meaning the National Monitor Office, when they replied, they suggested that ESD may lose connection to the employer if that placement is no longer working on the date of the field check, which we know isn't accurate because H2A employers must recruit up to 50% of the contract period, and then they must keep their job order up and posted for recruitment purposes. So there is a potential that another worker does make its way through the workforce system and then eventually gets placed on that same job order. Now, for potential impacts, ultimately, I anticipate less field checks should this change go through. I anticipate less field checks will be conducted for two reasons. One of them is contract abandonment, and then the second one is the turnaround time. Now, contract abandonment will be our biggest hurdle because in my experience, having conducted these, I would say a good, I don't know, 70, 80, I would even argue maybe as high as 90% of the field checks that we conducted, well, at least in my area, were conducted at a time that the worker was no longer working the job order. There are placements, of course, that start the job order and finish through in its entirety, but I would say those are few and far in between. Now, the second part is the turn, like I mentioned, is the turnaround time. Basically, the time it takes between notification of a successful placement from the job center staff to the time that it takes us to get out there and successfully execute a field check. That's going to be a challenge. Even if we were to conduct these as a single agency, we would still have logistics to work out. When there's a timer involved, the logistics are going to get tricky. When field checks are conducted, just a little bit on field checks. When we conduct field checks, we do them in teams of 4. We do them in 4 so that we can divide up the field check. A team of 2 does records review. The other 2 go out into the field. They conduct worker interviews and job site and housing inspections. We do that to be more efficient with the employer's time. So anyways, back to the turnaround time. Even as a small team, one entity, trying to plan logistics with members of the ASWS team spread out all over the state, it's already challenging to have a quick turnaround time. You add in the fact that we have agreements to invite other agencies to participate in these checks, and as you can imagine, logistics can get even more complex. The other part is site visits. That definitely is something we need to consider on turnaround time. ASWS aims for the goal of 100% field checks. So getting out to contact every worker is a priority. What that means, though, is that ASWS compliance specialists usually have site visits scheduled out for several weeks at a time. And like I mentioned earlier, these are coordinated at the convenience of the employer, whom we are also tasked to serve. Yeah.
National Monitor Advocate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Planning these field checks around those will undoubtedly lead to longer turnaround times. And like I mentioned, longer turnaround times usually lead to contract abandonments as a result. People that do get placed on field checks, the majority of them are a couple days. It could be as little as a few hours. So next steps, ESD does plan to draft a letter seeking to confirm what was sent to me. At the end of the day, the National Monitor Advocate's response was relayed to me in an email. And while it is the National Monitor Advocate that provided the response, we, ESD, would like clarifying guidance to be delivered in a more official manner, where ESD can provide a little bit of context for the clarification request, and USDOL will get the opportunity to make that official determination as a whole. Now, where we are in that is last week I did meet with the Regional Monitor Advocate. Yeah. It became clear to her that it is necessary that the National Monitor Advocate in Washington State do need to have a meeting concerning this specific topic. Honestly, I was hoping that meeting would have happened earlier this week, just to get things cleared up, and perhaps I'd really have nothing to present to you. But since that meeting never happened, we thought it appropriate to get this on your radar. And we're shooting for that meeting to happen sometime next week. And I'll have more after that meeting to share with the members at the next meeting. With that said, that concludes my presentation on the topic, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Well, it sounds like they don't really want you doing field checks. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
God.
Michelle, if I could just chime in here, just so we're clear on like the current state, and maybe thanks for the presentation, Art, just to sort of capture it in its entirety. When a domestic worker is placed on site, we go do a field check. We complete the field check, even if the worker is not there. That is still what is occurring. What has happened here, however, is Art, in his role as state monitor advocate, he meets with a regional monitor advocate and a national monitor advocate, had a comment in a meeting, and then a follow-up email that said for the agency to be able to conduct a field check, the domestic worker still has to be on site. So what you see in next steps is really what we want to do to make certain that that is in fact Department of Labor policy, which is to say that ultimately, maybe we'll learn more in this meeting with the National Honor Advocate, but our intent would be to send a letter to get an official response. So field check policy is still the same right now, but this is the heads up that it might change from the Department of Labor. And I should say, just to span out a little bit more, we, in all areas, workforce of the Department of Labor, we have a history of getting verbal communications, email communications, and then there's of course guidance, so and rules and statutes. So from our perspective, ideally, if there is a policy that we need to follow, we want to see it in statute, rules, or guidance. We have the under Department of Labor's direction, traditionally accepted email communication also as a written communication that says this is how you should, this is the policy you should have on any given workforce issue. In this case, and you can hear from Art's good presentation there, this sort of just randomly came up. And while we do have an email, even that email itself has some lack of clarity. So I'll just stop by saying again, we're going to continue to do field checks the way that we have been. We're going to engage in these next steps as Art laid out. Ultimately, likely sending a letter, and we'll see what we'll get back. But yeah, Michelle, to your point, if in the end this is the policy, to what Art explained, it's going to be really challenging for us to timely get to a site when there's a domestic worker still there for a field check.
And how are you going to know if the worker's still there or not?
That's a large part of the challenge right there. So we will, if this actually becomes what we have to do, we're going to have to give some thought to how we approach this.
Right, because they're supposed to be unannounced, so you couldn't contact them to ask.
No, the field checks.
So the field check, how it works is we will contact the employee just to verify that the worker has been in fact hired. However, after that, then we don't say the purpose, we don't say we're going to do a field check. No, we just call to verify that the worker is actually there. Yes. But then also this current situation, the team is already thinking, you know, if we would actually, this becomes the final guidance, we're thinking already like how we're gonna try to do a field check maybe as fast as possible, and that way, but we are evaluating on possible solutions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Michelle, I don't know if I cut you off there. Please go ahead.
No, not at all. And I appreciate your clarification. I just can't help. I mean, I feel like the department and this committee have really worked hard to make this field check a reality and to use this as a way to compliance, you know, in the state. And I think it's a very valuable tool. And I'm just frustrated. But no, I have no other questions. Thanks.
Art, please.
Yeah, just like to add, this is if this does in fact happen. I mean, like you mentioned, Susanna, we do call to verify, but it's kind of hard to make it an unannounced visit when you call to verify, and then you're also on a timer to turn around and get these checks done. So it's also a huge part of our tool belt that we'd be losing. You know, if this change does happen, I can see, you know, employers losing because, you know, especially the small ones that don't have too much H2A exposure, they'd lose the opportunity. I say opportunity of ESD running through and identifying deficiencies, you know, and getting those fixed before enforcement agencies make their way through there, you know, and also the workers lose when we do go out there to conduct these checks and we interview these workers. Sometimes they pass us little tidbits of things that they'd like to see in order to improve their situation. I like off the top of my head, now that they're, well, they've always been, but now that they would like to see sick time available on their check stubs, and most employers I've worked with have been more than happy to accommodate little things like that, and anything they could do to make the workers happy, they usually end up doing. So they did put, their allotted sick time availability on the check stubs. But I think the biggest piece that worries me in this interaction is that we lose the ability to conduct field checks on bad actors. And once they figure out that a part of the requirement is that the place worker still be on the check, on the working the job order when a field check comes in, they'll find reasons to do layoffs, terminations, and just push them off onto a different job that isn't necessarily an H-2A job order. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Art. I believe that takes us to our public comment. So if you would like to make a public comment, including any suggested future agenda items, please state your name and spell it so we can capture it for the minutes, as well as your organization. Your comments are being recorded. However, if you'd like your comments to be included in the meeting minutes, please submit them in writing via email to Vicki Carlson. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Do we have any members of the public that would like to add their comments to our meeting? All right. Seeing none, I would make the invitation to our committee members if you have anything that you'd like to say for the good of the order. Mike's shaking his head. Nope. Mike's the only one saying. So, all right. Well, with that, we did put a couple things on the future agenda. At our next meeting, we are going to chat about recruitment complaints. I'm gonna bring some information back on that. DOH and Mike are going to get together and talk about the TWH inspections. And I think there were a couple other items that we might be adding as well to include, the next report out of the data that we have on 2226 and some information on what we can and cannot do. If there are other items that the committee would like to see, our next meeting is November 20th. It is a virtual meeting. And then our meeting following that is January 16th, and that is our planning meeting for next year. Okay, so we've got those 2 meetings coming up. And with that, if there's no comments, we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.